Germany of Iron and Blood. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451, Burning and Sinking. Your Excellency, the battleship Ramillies requests to retreat again. On the battleship Revenge, the flagship of the Royal Navy, a staff officer reported to Admiral John Jellicoe. Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty have both seen the tragedy of the battleship Ramillies. After being severely beaten by the battleship Saxony of the German Navy, the battleship Ramillies has been severely damaged. Of the only 4 dual-mounted 381mm main guns, only 2 can continue to fire. In addition, after the chimney was blown off, the battleship could no longer discharge the thick smoke, which also had a great impact on the speed of the battleship. Damn it, how did this happen? What are the determination and the sovereign doing? Are they just watching the Germans attack the Ramillies? Lieutenant General David Beatty scolded. Of course, Lieutenant General David Beatty said something like this: "It is undoubtedly a bit wronged. In the battle just now, the battleship Determination and the battleship Monarchy also did their best. It's just that they are not as brave as the battleship Saxon, and they can easily hit the target." The officers on the bridge all looked at Admiral John Jellicoe, as if they were waiting to see what choice he would make at this time. Admiral John Jellicoe also hesitated. "Let the battleship Ramillies continue to fight, and do not retreat without an order," Admiral John Jellicoe ordered. "Yes, General. However, isn't this too cruel for the battleship Ramillies?" Lieutenant General David Beatty couldn't help asking. After all, under such circumstances, Admiral John Jellicoe clearly wanted the battleship Ramillies to die. The lives of thousands of officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy on the battleship were not taken seriously. At the same time, give orders to the battleship Resolution and the battleship Sovereign, requiring them to seize this opportunity to sink the German battleship. Admiral John Jellicoe immediately issued the second order command. Everyone immediately understood what Admiral John Jellicoe meant. What he meant was obvious, that is, even if the battleship Ramillies died, it would be worthwhile to die. If you can seize this opportunity and sink the German battleship in one fell swoop, even if the battleship Ramillies is sunk, it will undoubtedly be worth it. It's just that such an order is a bit too cruel. Of course, from the perspective of Admiral John Jellicoe, there was no other way. Who made the performance of the German Navy so perverted that they were completely suppressed. After Admiral John Jellicoe's order was issued, the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy on the battleship Ramillies, no matter how dissatisfied they were, could only obey the order and stood on the battle line stubbornly, resisting those shells fired by the battleship Saxon of the German Navy. But the battleship Resolution and the battleship Sovereign were unwilling to waste the opportunity that the battleship Ramillies had won for them, so they went all out and fired at the battleship Saxon at the maximum rate of fire shooting. However, they seem to have forgotten that the battleships Baden and Württemberg of the German Navy can also open fire on the battleships Resolution and Sovereign of the British Navy without any interference. The situation is still very unfavorable to the British Navy. Let all the turrets aim at one point. We have already severely damaged the British battleship. With a few more hits, we can send him to the bottom of the sea. In the command tower of the battleship Saxon, Königslange Colonel Tegg gave the order excitedly. For Colonel Königslange and all the members of the battleship Saxon, as long as they can sink the battleship Ramillies, their adventure will undoubtedly be regarded as the greatest harvest. Boom. 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 The 3 triple-mounted 380mm main guns on the battleship Saxon once again roared. 9 shells slammed into the battleship Ramillies fiercely. In this round of salvo, the battleship Saxon scored another hit. Or 380mm artillery shell directly hit the conning tower of the battleship Ramillies. Although it was protected by a 330mm thick armor, it still failed to withstand the 380mm shells, and the armor was directly torn apart. The shell exploded inside the conning tower, killing all the officers including the captain. In the entire command tower, a piece of flesh and blood flew everywhere, as if they had entered sheer hell. The command organization was taken away in one pot, making the situation of the battleship Ramillies even worse. After losing command, the battleship was in chaos. The battleship Saxon seized this opportunity and continued to violently shell the battleship Ramillies. In the next few rounds of salvo, shells hit the battleship Ramillies almost every time. Under such circumstances, even if the battleship Ramillies is a battleship with a full load displacement of more than 31,000 tons and a relatively weak defense, it can't resist it. Too many bullets were shot, causing the entire battleship to start burning. At the same time, the port side was also seriously flooded, and the hull had already begun to pour. In order to prevent the hull from capsizing and restore the balance of the hull, the acting captain issued an order to inject water to the starboard side, hoping to keep the battleship in this way. But unfortunately, this not only failed to save the battleship Ramillies, but pushed it into the abyss of sinking. After a large amount of seawater was injected into the hull, the buoyancy of the battleship Ramillies was seriously insufficient, and the hull had begun to sink. Until this time, the officers and soldiers of the British Royal Navy on the battleship Ramillies realized the problem. But at this time, they were already powerless to prevent the sinking of the battleship. As a last resort, the acting captain immediately gave the order to abandon the ship. At this time, they had no time to consult Admiral John Jellicoe for advice. But even so, hundreds of people still failed to evacuate the battleship Ramillies in time, and sank into the icy North Sea along with the burning battleship. The battleship Ramillies was sunk, which directly caused the loss of one of the battleships that the Royal Navy relied on most. This undoubtedly made the situation of the Royal Navy even more difficult. Chapter 452, Dilemma. Your Excellency, the battleship Ramillies has been sunk. A staff officer reported to Admiral John Jellicoe. John Jellicoe, Admiral, and David Beatty, Lieutenant General, witnessed the Ramillies battleship was sunk. This made them feel very sad. The Revenge-class battleship is their most powerful battleship. Unexpectedly, it was sunk by the German Navy so easily. Then, the remaining Revenge-class battleships may not be able to withstand the German attack. It can be said that they have lost this battle. Next, these capital ships of theirs may be sunk one by the German Navy. At this time, the battleship Resolution of the British Navy finally hit the battleship Saxony of the German Navy. Or 380mm artillery shell hit the mount of the No. 1 main turret of the battleship Saxon. Although, the armor of the battleship Saxon is as thick as 380mm. However, the angle of the shell fired by the battleship Resolution was too tricky. After the shell exploded, it directly overturned the No. 1 main turret of the battleship Saxon. At the same time, because the front main gun of the Saxon battleship was designed as a piggyback turret, the No. 2 main gun turret was also implicated and could not continue to fire. This caused the battleship Saxon to lose 2/3 of its firepower at once. Good job. Seeing this scene, Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty couldn't help shouting. But at the same time, they also feel a little regretful. If the battleship Resolution can hit the battleship Saxon before the battleship Saxon kills the battleship Ramillies, it may be able to save the Ramillies. However, it was also a surprise to be able to severely damage the battleship Saxon, causing it to lose most of its combat effectiveness. Otherwise, the Saxon joined the bombardment of several other Revenge-class battleships, and that would be truly fatal. Before he had time to enjoy the joy, he was hit, which surprised the German naval officers and soldiers on the battleship Saxony. During the construction, Colonel Konix Lang had quickly ordered the battleship to turn around and regain the distance between it and the British battleship. If you continue to fight at a distance of 10,000 meters, you will be courting death. Originally, the sinking of the battleship Ramillies further expanded the advantages of the German Navy. However, the battleship Saxon was severely damaged, which immediately reduced their advantage a lot. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, who was already smiling, suddenly darkened a lot. However, in calculations, the German Navy still took advantage. It is still very cost effective to exchange the heavy damage of a battleship for the sinking of a British battleship. The battleship Saxon only needs to return to the shipyard and reinstall a new main gun to restore its combat effectiveness. Give the battleship Saxon an order and let them return. Admiral Reinhard Scheer ordered. With the battleship Saxon losing 2 main turrets, Admiral Reinhard Scheer obviously didn't want them to continue taking risks. However, Colonel Konix Lang had refused this order, and he asked Admiral Reinhard Scheer to continue fighting. Although the battleship Saxon lost 2 main turrets, the number 3 main turret at the rear can continue to fight. The triple-mounted 380mm main gun can still exert extremely strong combat effectiveness. Admiral Reinhard thought about it and finally agreed to the request of Colonel Gornix Langhart, allowing them to stay and continue fighting. Next, the battleship Saxon began to cooperate with the battleship Baden to attack the battleship Resolution of the British Navy in an attempt to take revenge. However, the combat effectiveness of the battleship Saxon with only 1 main turret left has been greatly reduced. In the ensuing battle, it didn't play a big role either, but they sank the battleship Ramillies of the British Navy, giving the German Navy a greater advantage in this naval battle, which is a great achievement. As the battleships Agincourt and Ramillies were sunk, the situation of the battle became increasingly unfavorable for the British Navy, although they are still holding on. However, many officers and soldiers were frustrated. If it weren't for the support of a strong will to fight, they might have collapsed long ago. After the battleship Agincourt was sunk, the battleship Luitpold Regent and the battleship Nassau of the German Navy were besieging the battleship Ireland of the British Navy, making Ireland the US battleship is in danger. Although the battleship Ireland has a powerful firepower composed of 5 twin 343mm main guns, it was still completely suppressed when faced with the siege of 2 warships of the same level by the German Navy. What's more, the battleship Ireland is a foreign trade battleship, and its defense itself is very poor. Once it is hit, it means a lot of injuries, or even serious damage. Boom. A shell fired from the battleship Ireland successfully hit the battleship Nassau. The shell hit the conning tower, but unfortunately, because the fuse was too sensitive, the shell exploded before it penetrated the armor of the conning tower. But the huge power still stunned all the officers in the command tower. As a last resort, the battleship Nassau can only be temporarily commanded by the navigator. The shelling was also interrupted for several minutes, but it quickly recovered. Seeing that their own shelling hit the target, the British naval officers and soldiers on the battleship Ireland couldn't help cheering. However, before their cheers fell, the German Navy responded. The battleship Luitpold Regent once again demonstrated its strong combat effectiveness. A 343mm artillery shell hit the battleship Ireland near the midship waterline. Although the waterline armor of this part of the Ireland battleship is as thick as 305mm, it still cannot withstand the shell. After the shell tore through the waterline armor of the battleship Ireland, it exploded. The huge power immediately blasted a big hole. Immediately afterwards, the battleship Luitpold Regent continued its efforts. In the next salvo, it hit the battleship Ireland many times, directly sending the battleship and the battleship into the bottom of the sea. Chapter 453, The Most Worrying Thing. Your Excellency, the Ireland was sunk by the Germans. Lieutenant General David Beatty said with a livid face. General John Jellicoe seems to have become numb. After losing the 3rd battleship again, there were only 11 battleships on their battle line. For the German Navy, there are 14 more. Although the battleships of the British Royal Navy also hit the battleships of the German Navy many times during the battle, except for the battleship Saxon, which was severely damaged, the rest of the battleships suffered at most a little damage. Even the battleship Saxon, although there is only 1 main turret left, isn't it still fighting? The current situation is becoming more and more unfavorable to us. We already have many warships and have been besieged by the Germans. I'm afraid it will be very difficult to continue. What's more, from beginning to end, what we are facing is still just one battle line of the Germans. I'm afraid that another battle line will soon join the battle. At that time, our disadvantage may be further expanded. Lieutenant General David Beatty said anxiously. They are now completely watching the German Navy's continuous expansion of its advantages. In the end, the Royal Navy will definitely be completely crushed by the German Navy. Such a result is undoubtedly difficult for them to accept. General John Jellicoe nodded. It can be said that now, he has no hope of winning. There is no longer any hope for the heavy damage to the German Navy. Judging from the current battle situation, it is almost impossible to realize their strategic goals. However, the battle has reached the current point. Do they still have a way? Even if they want to withdraw from the battle, the German Navy will not let them go. although the Royal Navy still has a large number of small and medium-sized warships. However, several battle cruisers of the German Navy have already begun attacks on these small and medium-sized warships. In the face of powerful battle cruisers, the losses of the small and medium-sized warships of the British Navy were also very large. These cruisers and destroyers can't even withstand a single shot from those battle cruisers. Although the torpedoes they carry may pose a huge threat to these battle cruisers. However, the German Navy also has a vote of small and medium-sized warships to closely protect these battle cruisers. Even if the number is not comparable to that of the British Navy, there is no problem at all as a bodyguard within the range of its own capital ship. The small and medium-sized warships of the British Navy also tried to launch lightning strikes several times in order to realize the tactics of using small and broad. But unfortunately, none of them were successful. Instead, under the attack of the capital ships of the German Navy, they suffered heavy losses. It was only when he had to be honest. Your Excellency, why not? Let's break through immediately. In this case, we may be able to break out of some warships and return to Scapa Flow, Lieutenant General David Beatty suggested. Of course, Lieutenant General David Beatty also knew that these capital ships, because of their slow speed, probably would not be able to escape back to Scapa Flow. However, those small and medium warships can still escape a lot. Now, it is no longer a question of how much can be escaped. As long as there are warships that can escape, it is a victory. However, if these capital ships are abandoned, the British Navy will have no chance at all. After deducting their remaining 11 battleships, among the capital ships of the British Navy, there are only 3 Queen Elizabeth-class battleships, 1 Orion-class battleship, and 1 Giant-class battleship that were hit hard in the morning. With the battlecruiser Tiger, plus the battleship Dreadnought, that did not participate in this battle, there are only 7 capital ships in total. Although such strength is not weak, they have no chance to compete with the German Navy. If Admiral John Jellicoe is allowed to choose, he naturally hopes to allow these existing capital ships to escape some more. At that time, even if the Royal Navy has lost a complete defeat in this naval battle, at least there is still a relatively large room for maneuver. General Beatty, do you think it is possible for us to persist until night? Admiral John Jellicoe asked. David Beatty Lieutenant General immediately understood the meaning of General John Jellicoe. If you can persist until night, with the help of the cover of night, well, they might really be able to escape. Of course, by that time, they will not have many battleships left. But in that case, it's better than being sunk all. Your Excellency, Commander, we don't have many battleships left. However, it is only a few hours before dark. If we are lucky, we may be able to last until night. Let all the battleships increase the speed to the highest. In this case, it will not be so easy for the Germans to hit our warship. Lieutenant General David Beatty suggested. When the battleship sails at high speed on the sea, the ship will be very bumpy. In this case, the accuracy of shooting will be greatly reduced. Of course, the same will be true for the battleships of the British Navy. It's just that at this time the British no longer expect to defeat the German Navy, and they are lucky to be able to guarantee that they will not be hit. Admiral John Jellicoe nodded. Command the fleet, start speeding up. After holding on until night, find a chance to evacuate immediately. Yes, General. Lieutenant General David Beatty immediately issued the order. The battleships of the British Royal Navy began to speed up one after another. Although the speed of the battleship is not fast, it is no problem to increase it to 20 knots. In order to continue to attack the British Navy, the German Navy had to speed up. However, the consequence of the speed increases that the hit rate of the shelling began to drop further. Damn the British, are they planning to escape? Admiral Reinhard Scheer couldn't help but frowned. What Admiral Reinhard Scheer has been worrying about is finally about to happen. In this naval battle, he was not afraid that the British Navy would fight them to the end. What he feared most was that the British would run away if they saw something bad going on. If the British wanted to escape, and the German Navy wanted to keep them all, it would be very difficult. Once these British warships fled back, it would undoubtedly be quite difficult to encircle and suppress them in the future. So Admiral Reinhard Scheer has been trying to avoid it. But I didn't expect that in the case of heavy losses, the British would inevitably have such a choice. Chapter 454, Crisis. sent a telegram to General Hipper, asking when the second battle line could join the battle. Admiral Reinhard Scheer ordered. Although the British planned to flee, however, the German Navy also needs to maximize its results and sink as many British Navy warships as possible. If at this time, the second battle line can join the siege of the British Navy, then everything will be much easier. On the second battle line, there are 14 equally powerful battleships and battle cruisers. For the British Navy, it is also a deadly threat. Your Excellency, General Hipper called, and they will be able to join the battle within half an hour at most, the communications officer reported. Admiral Reinhard Scheer nodded. The second battle line could join the battle in time, which undoubtedly allowed the German Navy to mobilize more forces to besiege the British Navy. Of course, it is not realistic to sink all these battleships of the British Navy, but it can also sink as many British warships as possible. In this case, the German Navy can also achieve a brilliant victory. Boom. 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 The battleships of the German Navy are still firing crazily, shells one after another, smashing at the British battleships trying to escape. However, because both sides are sailing at high speed, the hit rate has dropped to an outrageous level. After seeing this scene, Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty put their hearts back into their stomachs. Your Excellency, the Germans will find it difficult to hit us. Perhaps we can hold on until night, Lieutenant General David Beatty said. Of course, they have lost more than a dozen capital ships in this battle. However, being able to save another batch of capital ships is already a pretty good victory. Well, I hope God can bless the British Empire, Admiral John Jellicoe said. The current Admiral John Jellicoe has already started to have a headache. How should he report to Churchill next? There is no doubt that this time the Royal Navy once again stumbled and lost so many battleships. Moreover, the combat mission assigned by Churchill has not yet been completed. This undoubtedly made the Royal Navy lose a complete defeat in this battle. Not only that, but this also means that Britain is almost at the point where it will never be able to stand up in this war. Your Excellency, the German second battle line has caught up. At this moment, a staff officer reported. What? The second battle line? Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty were shocked. One battle line of the German Navy caused them to lose 3 battleships and had to retreat in embarrassment. If there is another battle line, how can they hold it? Even if you want to persist until night, it may become a delusion. Bastard. The Germans are going to kill us. Lieutenant General David Beatty couldn't help cursing. Admiral John Jellicoe's face was also very ugly. He knew that what he thought before was still too optimistic. The Germans will not let their warships escape so easily. Under the attack of the 2 battle lines of the Germans, Admiral John Jellicoe was not sure how many warships they could hold out until night, and finally fled back to Scapa Flow Point. The second battle line of the German Navy, commanded by Lieutenant General Hipper, Chief of Staff of the High Seas Fleet. The entire battle line, including 5 King-class battleships, 5 Helgoland-class battleships, 3 Mackensen-class battlecruiser and Lupsau battlecruiser. To some extent, the combat effectiveness of the second battle line is stronger than that of the first battle line, because among the 14 capital ships that make up the second battle line, except for the 5 Helgoland-class battleships that are equipped with 343mm main guns, the rest of the battleships are equipped with 380mm main guns. This is a real deadly threat to those warships of the British Navy. The flagship of the second battle line is the battleship King, and Lieutenant General Hipper was also transferred here from the battleship Mackensen. Command the fleet, continue to accelerate, catch up with the British, and then open fire. No matter what, they can't escape this time, Lieutenant General Hipper said. The first battle line sank 3 battleships of the British Navy, and at the same time the British fled in embarrassment. This made Lieutenant General Hipper very jealous, and he also wanted to make more achievements. Now that there are so many powerful warships in the second battle line, he is of course unwilling to let go of such a good opportunity easily. The second battle line of the German Navy began to chase after it. In less than half an hour, it successfully caught up with the British Navy and began to launch an attack. Fire! Sink all the British warships. Lieutenant General Hipper gave the order. Boom. 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 9 battleships and battlecruisers equipped with 380mm main guns, plus 5 battleships equipped with 343mm main guns, began to pour shells into the British Navy. This is a total of 81, 380mm and 45, 343mm main guns. Regardless of the number or caliber of the main guns, they completely overwhelmed the British Navy. The addition of 14 battleships in the second battle line immediately made the situation of the British Navy even worse. Although, in the case of high-speed navigation, the probability of hitting the target is very low. However, this does not mean that the target cannot be hit. It's just a waste of shells. This is nothing to the German Navy. The 2 battle lines of the German Navy, a total of 28 capital ships, besieged the remaining 11 capital ships of the British Navy, which immediately made this naval battle even more tragic. Of course, the word tragic is undoubtedly relative to the British Navy. For the German Navy, this is nothing at all. They only need to use powerful shells to destroy the British warships and win the final victory. Aboard the battleship Revenge, the flagship of the British Navy, the brows of Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant Admiral David Beatty were already frowning. Facing the powerful attack power of the German Navy, the entire British fleet was in danger, like a small boat passing through a storm, and it might capsize at any time. Damn the Germans. They obviously bully us, because they have more capital ships than us. Lieutenant General David Beatty cursed unwillingly. But even so, they are already in the crisis of life and death, which cannot be changed. Chapter 455, to break out. In the waters off the east of Scotland, the Grand Fleet of the Royal Navy of the British Empire and the High Seas Fleet of the German Empire are engaged in the largest naval battle in human history. There were more than 200 ships invested by the two sides, and more than 100,000 officers and soldiers participated in the battle. Giant ships made of steel collided crazily in this sea area. Boom. 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 Those huge steel warships are firing crazily, and heavy cannons are smashing at each other, trying to sink the opponent's warship. The shells hit the water, splashing jets of water into the sky. The situation on the battlefield is very unfavorable to the British Navy. Although the Royal Navy's large fleet has increased its speed to the highest, it is still being hit non-stop under the siege of 24 battleships in the 2 battle lines of the German Navy. Especially those battleships behind the battle line are under siege by many capital ships of the German Navy, and the situation is quite difficult. The battleships Canada and Hercules of the British Navy are such unlucky ones. The battleships Prince Regent of the German Navy, the battleships Nassau, the battleships West, the battleships Rhineland, the battleships Person, and 3 the siege of the Mackensen class battlecruisers and the Lutzow class battlecruisers. This is undoubtedly a disaster for these 2 battleships. The battleship Canada is also a foreign trade battleship, with a full load displacement of more than 32,000 tons, and is equipped with 5 twin 356mm main guns. Such firepower is undoubtedly very powerful. However, like other foreign trade warships, the armor of the Canada battleship is very weak. The armor thickness of the waterline main armor belt is only 228mm, the armor of the turret is only 254mm, and the armor of the conning tower is only 280mm. Such a defense is undoubtedly vulnerable to the main guns of the battleships of the German Navy. This is undoubtedly a typical British battleship, with heavy firepower and light defense. The Hercules battleship is the second ship of the giant battleship of the British Navy. The thickness is only 280mm, and the armor on the front of the turret and the conning tower is also only 280mm. The battleships Canada and Hercules, with such weak defenses, can imagine the difficulty of persevering under the siege of the capital ships of the German Navy. What should we do? The Germans have gathered so many battleships to besiege us. The captain of the battleship Canada was about to turn green. Seeing those shells constantly falling around his battleship, this is undoubtedly a great psychological test. Boom. There was a loud noise, and the battleship Canada shook violently. Fortunately, the captain immediately grabbed the table fixed in the conning tower, otherwise, the whole person would have fallen to the ground. However, his face at this moment has turned pale. He knew that his warship was hit. Report. We were hit by a German 380mm round. The entire stern was knocked out. A staff officer reported. "Arsehole, do damage control immediately." The captain shouted loudly, 380mm shells. This was a fatal blow to the weakly armored battleship Canada. However, before the captain's roar fell, the Canada was hit again. Shells fired from the battle cruisers Mackensen and Prince Frederick of the German Navy hit the hapless battleship almost simultaneously. Two 380mm artillery shells directly penetrated the hull of the battleship Canada and exploded inside the battleship. The huge power blew up all the internal cabins. What's more terrible is that a shell broke the keel of the battleship Canada. This immediately caused the battleship Canada to suffer fatal damage. Soon, with a click, the keel of the battleship Canada broke. This directly caused the battleship Canada to be broken into two pieces. In less than 2 minutes, the battleship sank into the sea. None of the more than 1,100 officers and soldiers on the battleship survived. After the battleship Canada was sunk, the battleship Hercules, which was at the rear of the battle line, was immediately besieged by several battleships of the German Navy. This made the battleship Hercules unable to last long under the siege. In less than 10 minutes, the battleship Hercules was hit many times, and the entire battleship was on fire. At the same time, there are loopholes everywhere, causing a large amount of water to enter the battleship. Soon, the battleship Hercules followed in the footsteps of the battleship Canada and sank into the sea. Two battleships were sunk in succession, making the situation of the Royal Navy even worse. In the current Royal Navy, there are only 4 Revenge-class battleships left, 1 King George V battleship and 3 Orion-class battleships. Moreover, these battleships are also in danger under the siege of the superior battleships of the German Navy. Your Excellency, the current situation is even more unfavorable to us. The battleships Canada and Hercules were sunk, and we only have 8 battleships left. And our enemy has 3 more battleships. The 16 battleships are more than 4 times as many as ours. I'm afraid it's impossible to persist until night. Lieutenant General David Betty's face was so pale that there was no trace of blood, and the whole person seemed to be like having a serious illness. John. Admiral Jellicoe nodded. Even though it was already 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was only a few hours before it got dark. However, these few hours are undoubtedly difficult for the Royal Navy. The capital ships of the German Navy will continue to fire during this period of time. They simply can't last that long. Your Excellency, Commander, we are always under the attack of the Germans. There is no way. We must find a way to break through the encirclement of the Germans. Only in this way can we escape. David Betizan will continue to say. You mean, use small and medium-sized warships to launch lightning strikes? Admiral John Jellicoe said. Yes, Commander, this is the only way. Only in this way can we break through. David Betty looked determined. General John Jellicoe thought for a while, and finally nodded. Chapter 456, Lightning Strike. Your Excellency, Commander, we used 1 light cruiser detachment and 5 destroyer detachments to launch lightning strikes on the 2 German battle lines at the same time. With such a high density attack, no matter how powerful the German battle line firepower, it will definitely be broken through. At that time, their formation will become messy, and the battle line will naturally disintegrate. We can use this opportunity to break out of the encirclement of the Germans. If we are lucky, we may be able to sink some of the German capital ships, Vice Admiral David Beatty said. Although, the main guns of those small and medium-sized warships did not pose any threat at all to the powerful capital ships of the German Navy. However, the heavy torpedoes they carried were deadly to the capital ships of the German Navy. After all, the power of a 533mm heavy torpedo is quite amazing. As long as it is hit, even the capital ship with the strongest defense of the German Navy will definitely not be able to hold it. In order to protect the colonies scattered all over the world, Britain has built many long-range and fast cruisers. When the war was about to break out, the British Navy also quickly built a large number of destroyers. In order to reverse the unfavorable situation once there is a chance to launch a lightning strike when the battle situation is unfavorable. Of course, it is almost impossible to simply rely on lightning strikes to defeat the already dominant German Navy. But if you are lucky and play a certain role, there should be no problem. Besides, now is the critical juncture of escaping, so naturally he must do everything possible and do his best. John. Admiral Jellicoe nodded, adopted David Beatty Lieutenant General's suggestion. The large fleet has a total of 4 light cruiser formations and 14 destroyer formations, with 24 light cruisers and 84 destroyers. These small and medium-sized warships have already lost a lot under the attack of the battle cruisers of the German Navy. But because of the large number of relationships, it can still play a great role. Send a telegram to the light cruisers and destroyers, asking them to launch lightning strikes in 10 minutes. It would be best if they can sink some battleships or battle cruisers of the German Navy. Admiral John Jellicoe ordered. In order to break through the siege of the German Navy and escape, Admiral John Jellicoe planned to sacrifice these small and medium warships. After all, compared to expensive battleships, those light cruisers and destroyers are relatively cheap. In addition, the construction period for these small and medium-sized warships is also very short. Even if they are lost, they can be replenished soon, so there is nothing to feel bad about. Yes, General. Lieutenant General David Beatty nodded. He also agreed with the idea of sacrificing those small and medium-sized warships and keeping the capital ships. After all, capital ships are the most important. Everything else can be discarded. When the telegram from Admiral John Jellicoe was sent to the light cruisers and destroyers, the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy felt uncomfortable. Although, it is their honor and their duty to die for the Royal Navy of the British Empire. However, no one will face death calmly. It's just that the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy are of first-class quality. They understand better what is the bounden duty of a soldier, so no one refuses to carry out the order. 10 minutes later, the operation of the British Navy began. The remaining 8 capital ships have further increased their speed. They forced draft the boilers to increase power and speed. Although, such behavior is undesirable, and it is impossible to persist for a long time. However, this is undoubtedly their only chance to escape quickly, so they must be treated with caution. At the same time, the light cruisers and destroyers of the British Navy rushed towards the 2 battle lines of the German Navy. Most of those light cruisers and destroyers are fast battleships that can increase their speed to over 30 knots. Even the 2 battle lines of the German Navy are 15 kilometers away from the main fleet of the British Navy. However, in front of these small and medium-sized warships, the distance of 15 kilometers only takes more than 10 minutes. The actions of the British Navy were learned by the German Navy as soon as it was launched. They also know very well what the British are doing, so many light warships of the British. Are they finally going to launch an attack? Order all ships to stop attacking the British capital ships and attack those light warships with all their strength. Light cruisers and destroyers assist the capital ships to resist the British's lightning strikes. Lay Admiral in Hertfordshire decisively issued an order. Although, abandoning the bombardment of the capital ships of the British Navy will undoubtedly give them a breathing space. But compared to the threat of the British light warships that are close at hand, it is undoubtedly extremely correct to temporarily let the British capital ships go. Yes, Your Excellency, Commander. The communications officer immediately conveyed Admiral Hertfordshire's order to every warship of the German Navy. Battleships and battle cruisers one by one began to turn their main guns, aiming at the light cruisers and destroyers that were approaching fast, and ignored the British battleships. The light cruisers and destroyers of the German Navy also quickly interspersed into the battlefield from the gaps between the battle lines. They are like bodyguards on one side of the battle line, resisting the attack of the British small and medium warships. At the same time, the main guns on these light cruisers and destroyers were also firing crazily. Although the caliber of the main guns of light cruisers and destroyers is relatively small, they can also pose a deadly threat to British light cruisers and destroyers. Boom. 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 The large caliber main guns of the capital ships of the German Navy fired continuously, and heavy artillery shells exploded on the sea, splashing jets of water into the sky. The light cruisers and destroyers of the British Navy walked through the artillery fire of the German Navy. They need to narrow the distance to within 2 kilometers before launching a lightning strike, so as to ensure that the torpedoes launched can pose a threat to the capital ships of the German Navy. Of course, if possible, the closer the distance, the better. However, in that case, the danger will naturally be higher. After all, the closer the distance, the German Navy's shelling hit rate will continue to increase. Walking through the intensive artillery fire of the German Navy, this made many officers and soldiers of the British Navy look a little pale. After all, for these small and medium-sized warships, once they are hit, especially by shells from large caliber main guns, they are dead. Chapter 457, Bravery. Boom. 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 The three 380mm main guns of the battleship Bavaria were aiming at a light cruiser of the British Navy and fired fiercely. However, although the power of the 380mm heavy artillery is amazing, it is still very difficult to hit a light cruiser at a speed of 30 knots. However, the Bavaria class battleship, in addition to having a 380mm main gun, is also equipped with a 150mm secondary gun and an 88mm rapid fire gun. These secondary guns and rapid fire guns pose a fatal threat to the light warships of the British Navy. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, standing on the bridge, used binoculars to observe the light warships of the British Navy that were rushing towards them at high speed. In front of huge battleships, these light battleships are like wild dogs in front of lions. However, the heavy torpedoes launched by these light warships posed a fatal threat to the capital ships of the German Navy. Therefore, they need to sink these British Navy light warships before they launch torpedoes. In this case, there will be no more threats. Boom. Boom. The shell slammed fiercely at the light cruiser of the British Navy, but none of them hit the target, and they all hit the sea. However, Admiral Reinhard Scheer was in no hurry. He knew that, when the British light cruiser approached, the hit rate would further increase. At that time, it will be easy to hit the target. Sure enough, when the light cruiser of the British Navy rushed to a distance of about 8 kilometers from the battleship Bavaria, it was constantly hit. Although some 150mm shells and 88mm shells hit the target, they still set the light cruiser on fire. But even so, the light cruiser of the British Navy continued to charge. It was as if such harm could not stop their actions at all. 2 minutes later, the light cruiser of the British Navy shook violently, as if it had been severely hammered by a giant with a heavy hammer. The entire bow of the ship was torn apart at once. Or 380mm artillery shell of the battleship Bavaria scored a hit. Just this one shell blew up the bow of the light cruiser to pieces. A large amount of seawater immediately poured into the light cruiser, causing the light cruiser to sink into the sea very quickly. After the light cruiser of the British Navy was dealt with, the light cruiser Bavaria did not stop at all, and directly aimed at another light cruiser of the British Navy, as if it had just shot one dead. Like a fly. Nothing to fuss about. Indeed, in front of the huge Bavaria battleship, the thousands of tons of light cruisers and smaller destroyers of the British Navy are like flies. Even on this light cruiser, there are hundreds of officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy. Their lives and deaths seem to be unimportant at all. The battle was very fierce, and the light battleships of the British Navy launched a crazy attack in order to close the distance to less than 2 kilometers. The capital ships of the German Navy, in order to stop the British, are also launching frenzied shelling. The dense shells fell densely, almost making the entire sea area boil. Come on. Go faster. We will be within the firing range of the torpedo soon. A British captain officer shouted loudly. The speed of the British destroyer under his command has increased to 34 knots. Moreover, the speed is still being further improved. Although, the displacement of this destroyer is only over 1,000 tons. However, it rushed towards the battlecruiser Mackensen of the German Navy like an arrow leaving the string. As long as they can rush within 2 kilometers of the battlecruiser Mackensen, they can launch torpedoes. The 533mm heavy torpedo is enough to cause fatal damage to the battlecruiser Mackensen of the German Navy. However, after only a minute, the light cruiser broke in two. Or 380mm artillery shell directly broke its keel. Boom. 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 The light cruisers and destroyers of the German Navy are also attacking with 150mm main guns and 105mm main guns, setting fire to the light cruisers and destroyers of the British Navy who are trying to launch a lightning strike on the German Navy's battle line. Similarly, the light cruisers and destroyers of the British Navy are also fighting back. Although they have to rush to within 2 kilometers before they can launch a lightning strike. But this does not mean that they will have been passively beaten before this. Their main guns can also pose a deadly threat to the light cruisers and destroyers of the German Navy. What's more, after destroying these light cruisers and destroyers, it will be easier to attack the capital ships of the German Navy. The battle between light warships is often the most tragic, because the defenses of these light warships are very weak. Once they are hit, they will often cause more damage. A destroyer of the British Navy finally rushed within 2 kilometers of the battleship Kaiser of the German Navy after a near death. 4 533mm heavy torpedoes were launched immediately. These torpedoes, at a speed of more than 30 knots, frantically fired at the battleship Caesar. The battleship Caesar immediately began to speed up and evade. Although, the underwater armor of the Caesar battleship is very thick, but only fools are stupid enough to use battleships to resist torpedoes, especially heavy torpedoes. That is simply an act of courting death. The commander of the battleship Caesar is certainly not a fool. It's just that the torpedoes launched by the British destroyers are distributed in a fan shape. The battleship Caesar was able to avoid the other 3, but there was one that could not. As a last resort, the captain of the battleship Caesar had to order the battleship to prepare for lightning protection. At the same time, pray to God, pray that the underwater armor of the battleship Caesar can withstand this torpedo. However, at this time, a destroyer of the German Navy bravely stood in front of the battleship Caesar, protecting the battleship Caesar with its weak body. Boom. A violent explosion sounded, and the destroyer was hit, and was directly blown into 2 pieces. However, the battleship Caesar was safe and sound. Arsehole, sink the destroyer of the British for me, the captain of the battleship Caesar ordered. The destroyer of the British Navy was hit by a 343mm shell fired by the battleship Caesar when it was turning, and was directly sunk. Chapter 458, The Beast Will Still Fight. The battle was very fierce. Dozens of light cruisers and destroyers of the British Navy heroically launched a lightning strike to the German Navy in order to cover the retreat of the main fleet. However, they suffered heavy losses under the fierce firepower of the German Navy. The capital ships, cruisers, and destroyers of the German Navy are using their main and secondary guns to cause damage to them. Even so, these light warships of the British Navy are still charging bravely. Boom. Boom. A destroyer of the British Navy successfully rushed to a place only 1,500 meters away from the battleship Nassau of the German Navy. Although, the battleship Nassau, already aware of the threat, fired at it violently with its main guns and secondary guns. However, unexpectedly, the destroyer seemed to be very lucky. It easily dodged these shells, fired 4 torpedoes calmly, and then turned away unharmed. Leave and evade. The captain of the battleship Nassau immediately issued an emergency evasion order. The speed of the battleship Nassau has increased to 21 knots, but it is undoubtedly very difficult to avoid the 4 torpedoes coming at high speed. Moreover, the good luck of the battleship Nassau in this battle seems to have been used up long ago. So much so that they have been unlucky in the ensuing battles. Among the 4 heavy torpedoes, 2 were missed. However, the other 2 hit the midship and stern of the battleship Nassau respectively. After the torpedo exploded, 2 large openings were torn directly below the waterline of the battleship Nassau. Seawater was poured into the hull of the battleship Nassau frantically. The captain of the battleship Nassau ordered the damage control personnel to conduct damage control immediately. At the same time, request the flagship to withdraw from the battle. Although, the 2 heavy torpedoes did not completely disable the battleship Nassau. However, under the current circumstances, if you continue to fight, you will most likely suffer more torpedoes. By that time, the battleship Nassau, which had already been severely damaged, would most likely be sunk. It is undoubtedly the safest thing to withdraw from the battlefield now. Admiral Reinhard Scheer immediately approved their withdrawal from the battle after receiving the request from the battleship Nassau. After all, the severely damaged battleship Nassau can restore its combat effectiveness only after returning to the shipyard for repairs. If you continue to fight, once you are sunk, the loss will be great. The battleship Nassau was hit by a torpedo and had to withdraw from the battlefield. This is undoubtedly a great incentive for the Royal Navy, especially the officers and men of the light cruisers and destroyers who fought bravely. They have all seen their contributions. Therefore, the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy continue to attack more bravely. Of course, this also caused more officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy to die on the way to attack. Boom. Boom. A light cruiser of the German Navy was hit by 2 torpedoes during the melee. Even a light cruiser with a displacement of more than 5,000 tons cannot withstand heavy torpedoes. 2 heavy torpedoes directly killed him. On another battlefield, a light cruiser of the British Navy is sinking. A battleship of the German Navy learned about his life with sharp gunfire. At this point in the battle, both sides have forgotten their fear. Everyone has only one purpose, and that is to sink the enemy point in the melee, except for the battleship Nassau, which was severely damaged. The battleships Grand Care 1st, Saxony and the battlecruiser Hindenburg were all severely damaged by torpedoes up. What was even more unlucky was the battleship Thuringia, the 3rd ship of the Helgoland class battleship, which was sunk directly because it was hit by too many torpedoes. It can be said that the German Navy paid a relatively heavy loss under the lightning strike of the British. However, they also achieved great results. Of the 12 light cruisers and 60 destroyers of the British Navy that participated in the lightning strike, 7 light cruisers and 45 destroyers were sunk. The rest of the light cruisers and destroyers eventually collapsed because they saw that their own formation losses were too great. It can be seen how great the results achieved by the German Navy are. The severely damaged capital ships all withdrew from the battlefield, and under the protection of other warships, they returned to Germany for repairs. However, the fight had to go on. It is absolutely impossible for the 8 British capital ships to escape. General Hipper lead the battle cruisers to pursue the British capital ship. They must not be allowed to escape. Admiral Reinhard Scheer ordered with a dark face. The lightning strike of the British Navy caused them to lose a battleship, and at the same time 4 capital ships were severely damaged. Such a price is not small. In particular, the battleship Thuringen became the first battleship of the German Navy to be sunk in this naval battle, which naturally made Admiral Reinhard Scheer full of anger up. Yes, General. Lieutenant General Hipper nodded. Because the remaining capital ships of the British Navy had already escaped in the chaos when their light warships launched a lightning strike. Now, it was 20 or 30 kilometers away from them. Even the battleships of the German Navy are slightly faster than the battleships of the British Navy. But if you want to catch up with the capital ship of the British Navy, it is simply impossible. Especially now, when it was only 3 hours before dark. As a last resort, Admiral Reinhard Scheer had no choice but to pin his hopes on the battlecruiser formation. Lieutenant General Hipper led the remaining 11 battlecruisers to pursue the fleeing British army at a speed of up to 25 knots. In order to ensure that the warship could sail back to Scapa Flow, the British Navy did not dare to keep the boiler of the warship under forced ventilation. So, their speed will soon drop to around 18 knots. 2 hours later, the battlecruiser unit led by Lieutenant General Hipper successfully caught up with the main fleet of the British Navy. Even so, the battlecruiser does not seem to be very suitable for a decisive battle with the enemy's capital ship. However, the defense of the battlecruisers of the German Navy is no worse than that of the British battleships. Especially when they still have an absolute numerical advantage. They have nothing to be afraid of. Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty also knew that it was almost impossible to escape from the battlecruisers of the German Navy. Therefore, they had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue fighting. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459, Last Effort. Your Excellency, the German battlecruisers are catching up. At our speed, it is impossible to get rid of them. Lieutenant General David Beatty looked serious. After all, battlecruisers are naturally much faster than battleships in terms of speed. In this respect, the 2 warships are almost incomparable. In this case, let's fight them again. Report the results of our lightning strike force to every warship, so that everyone can take courage again. Admiral John Jellicoe ordered. The news that the lightning strike formation sank one of the German Navy's capital ships and severely damaged 4 capital ships has been mastered by them. Admiral John Jellicoe naturally hoped to use this news to boost the morale of the troops. In this case, they may be able to exert stronger combat effectiveness in the next battle. Of course, Admiral John Jellicoe is also very distressed about the loss of the Thunderbolt formation, which has cost them almost half of their light warships. If it is counted, the British Royal Navy undoubtedly did not take advantage of it in the lightning strike operation just now. However, in order to ensure the morale and combat effectiveness of the troops, Admiral John Jellicoe and others would never tell the truth to ordinary soldiers. They also hope that in the next battle, these soldiers can continue to work hard. Your Excellency, it is only an hour before it gets dark. If we can hold on, we will be able to retreat successfully, Lieutenant General David Beatty said. 1 hour, although not short. However, for the Royal Navy, which has 8 capital ships, it is nothing. Most of them are officers of the Royal Navy, and they all think that they can last for such a long time. Not only do we have to hold on for an hour, but we also have to sink more German battleships within this hour. The German battleships have not caught up yet, and this is a last chance. Admiral John Jellicoe said. Even at this time, he has not forgotten to sink as many capital ships of the German Navy as possible. However, even so, how many capital ships of the German Navy can they really sink? It is undoubtedly impossible to achieve the goal of severely damaging the German Navy. Yes, Commander, we still have a chance. Lieutenant General David Beatty nodded. On the battlecruiser Mackensen, Lieutenant General Hipper also gave the order to fight. Although, the battlecruiser Hindenburg was hit by a torpedo and had to withdraw from the battle. However, they still have an overwhelming advantage in numbers. Now there are 11 battlecruisers against the British's 8 battleships. At the same time, there are 20 battleships in the rear that are quickly catching up. In this battle, the German Navy still has an absolute advantage. There are only 4 Avenge-class battleships left in the British Navy. Therefore, Lieutenant General Hipper assigned the 3 Mackensen-class battlecruisers and the Derfflinger battlecruiser to deal with these 4 Avenge-class battleships when assigning strike targets. That's how the HMS battlecruiser was against the battleship HMS King George v 3 Molt-class battlecruisers, and 3 Blücher-class battlecruisers besieged the 3 Orion-class battleships of the British Navy. After solving these 3 Orion-class battleships, they will besiege the previous British battleships to ensure that the German Navy can quickly win the naval battle. After all, Lieutenant General Hipper also realized that it was getting dark now. If too much time is wasted, this battle may not be able to achieve a perfect victory. Boom. 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 The battleship Revenge of the British Navy opened fire first, and the target was the battlecruiser Mackensen, the flagship of the battlecruiser formation of the German Navy. However, when the British Navy opened fire, the speed of the battle line remained at 18 knots, which greatly affected the accuracy of their shelling. After the British Navy opened fire, the German Navy immediately launched a counterattack. 11 battleships dealt with the 8 battleships of the British. No matter how you look at it, the German Navy has an absolute advantage. After 2 hours, the capital ships of both sides started a fierce exchange of fire again. The heavy shells, under the action of huge kinetic energy, slammed into the opponent's battleship fiercely, trying to sink the opponent's battleship. The British Navy hopes to make the German Navy pay heavy losses again before withdrawing from the battlefield. Also hopes to sink all the British capital ships to prevent them from escaping. Everyone knows that time is tight. If they have not achieved their respective goals after dark, it may be difficult to achieve their respective goals. This naval battle had to end with that result. Neither the British Navy nor the German Navy are obviously willing to accept such a result. Therefore, they all hope to work harder in this last hour. Maybe a miracle can happen because of this. The combat distance between the two sides was controlled within 12,000 meters. Although, a longer combat distance seems to be more beneficial to the German Navy. However, in order to improve the hit rate, Lieutenant General Hipper acquiesced that the British shortened the combat distance. The self-righteous British, they will soon know how wrong they are. After the combat distance is shortened, they also have less than the slightest advantage. Lieutenant General Hipper sneered. In less than 10 minutes, several battlecruisers of the German Navy completed straddle shooting and switched to focused fire. This could not help but make General John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty feel great pressure. The performance of the German Navy is still so strong. It is undoubtedly very difficult for the Royal Navy to achieve its goals in this naval battle. At 6:12 in the afternoon, the battleship Blucher of the German Navy successfully hit the battleship Monarch of the British Navy. Although the Orion-class battleship is a huge battleship with a full load displacement of more than 25,000 tons, it is equipped with 5 twin 343mm main guns. However, its defense is also not strong. The main armor belt is 305mm thick, and the defense of other turrets and conning towers is only 280mm. Although the battlecruiser Blucher is equipped with a 305mm main gun, the shells fired by the main gun with a caliber of 50 times have a powerful armor-piercing ability. Chapter 460, Ending. Or 305mm artillery shell fired from the battlecruiser Blucher blew a large hole in the bow of the battleship Monarch. Because the battleship Monarch used its main firepower to deal with seedlets, the Blucher launched an attack almost without any interference. Under this kind of calm attack, it naturally guarantees a higher hit rate. This shell did not cause much damage to the battleship Monarch. However, the blow to morale still has a certain impact. The 3 battleships behind the battle line of the British Navy are undoubtedly the most dangerous. Each of their battleships had to face the siege of 2 battlecruisers of the German Navy. Even the Blucher-class battlecruisers are equipped with 305mm main guns. However, the combination of the main gun with 50 times the caliber and the capped armor-piercing projectile is enough to penetrate the armor of the British Navy's Orion-class battleship. Less than 20 minutes after the battle started, many battleships of the Royal Navy were hit, although none of them were major injuries. But the battle has only just begun. Once the warships of the German Navy continue to hit them, they will cause heavy damage to them sooner or later. At that time, the loss of the Royal Navy may be great. Although the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy are also working hard to fire, but their hit rate was significantly lower than that of the German Navy. Moreover, it also did not cause too much damage to the warships of the German Navy. On the one hand, of course it is, because the battlecruisers of the German Navy have strong defenses. But on the other hand, it is because of the problems of the British Navy's artillery shells themselves. As time went on, the situation became more and more unfavorable to the British Navy. The faces of Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant General David Beatty also became more and more ugly. Your Excellency, no matter what, it shouldn't be a big problem if you persist for an hour, Lieutenant General David Beatty said. Of course, he was just trying to comfort people. John. Admiral Jellicoe nodded, did not say much. In his heart, he was also very nervous at the moment. Boom. Boom. At this moment, the battleship Thor, which was at the end of the battle line, was hit again. The shell fired from the battlecruiser Leopold hit the side of the battleship Thor. A big hole was torn open in the waterline armor, and seawater began to pour into the battleship frantically. At this time, the battlecruiser von der Tann of the German Navy also hit the battleship Thor. In the next few minutes, the battlecruiser Leopold and the battlecruiser von der Tann jointly hit the battleship Thor more than 10 times, blowing up the battleship riddled with holes. In the end, due to too much water, the battleship Thor quickly sank into the sea. After sinking the battleship Thunder, the battlecruisers von der Tann and Leopold joined the siege of the battleship Monarch of the British Navy. The battleship Monarch, which was besieged by 4 battlecruisers, was in an even more dangerous situation. Your Excellency, the Thor was sunk by the Germans. The Monarch was besieged by 4 German battlecruisers and is now in danger, a staff officer told Admiral John Jellicoe reported. But unfortunately, Admiral John Jellicoe was helpless about this. The only thing they can do is to wait for dark and then evacuate under the cover of night. Other than that, there is no other way. As for how many warships will be sunk by the German Navy during this waiting process, Admiral John Jellicoe does not know. Maybe, you can pray to God, let them suffer less loss. Order the ships to continue fighting. Admiral John Jellicoe ordered with a cold face. Under the siege of the German Navy, the battleship Monarch was sunk after only holding on for 5 minutes. During the fierce battle, the battleship was hit by at least 15 shells in 5 minutes. Even this huge battleship with a displacement of 25,000 tons can't hold it. In the violent explosion, the battleship Monarch was almost torn into pieces before sinking into the sea. Almost all of the more than 700 British naval officers and soldiers on the battleship sank into the sea together with the battleship, and none survived. After the battleship Monarch was sunk, it was the turn of the battleship Orion. This battleship was even more unlucky and was directly besieged by 6 battle cruisers. Its fate can be imagined. When the battleship Orion was sunk, the battleship Lutzow of the German Navy had already seriously injured the battleship King George V of the British Navy. This ship was very lucky. The battleship that successfully escaped the catastrophe in the last naval battle in the mid-Atlantic was not so lucky this time. The other battle cruisers that arrived later directly launched a siege on the battleship King George V. Soon, the battleship was also sunk. This also left the British Navy with only 4 Revenge-class battleships still struggling to support. However, they are still being suppressed. Now, other warships of the German Navy have eliminated the battleship King George V and the 3 Orion-class battleships. Then, what awaited them was undoubtedly being besieged. Although, there is not much time until dark. However, the besieged British Navy still paid a huge price. The battleship Royal Oak was silent during the siege because of too much water. The battleship Sovereign was even more unlucky. During the fierce battle, a 380mm artillery shell penetrated the ammunition depot of the rear main gun. After the shells in the ammunition depot were detonated, the entire stern of the ship was blown up. In the end, the battleship Sovereign sank into the icy North Sea with the stern down and the bow up. The battleships Revenge and Resolution of the British Navy were also severely damaged during the shelling. However, its speed was not affected. They persisted until dark, and then took advantage of the cover of night to escape the pursuit of the German Navy. This naval battle also came to an end. The whole day's naval battle finally ended with the victory of the German Navy. Chapter 461, Big Win. The night has completely dimmed, and the North Sea has become pitch black. Some burning warships illuminate a sea area. However, in general, the North Sea has entered a dark night. German ships with their searchlights turned on are searching back and forth to see if there are any survivors at sea. Regardless of whether it was the German Navy or the British Navy who fell into the water, they were rescued one by one. Although everyone was an enemy before. However, the battle is over, obligations of the soldiers have been fulfilled. Next, it's time for humanitarian aid. Of course, the British, as losers, had already escaped. They simply don't have that much leisure to rescue those poor people who fell into the water. Dozens of battleships went out to sea for a decisive battle with the German Navy, and only 4 crippled warships escaped in the end. Such a failure is also unacceptable to the Royal Navy. Moreover, after this failure, the Royal Navy can be regarded as finished. The German Navy won this battle at a very small cost. This also means that Germany has replaced Britain as the new maritime hegemony. Your Excellency, Commander, I'm very sorry, but we still haven't been able to keep all the British battleships. The battleship Revenge and the battleship Resolution have been severely damaged by us. But in the end they still escaped under the cover of night. It's over. Lieutenant General Hipper felt a little regretful. General Hipper, you have done a good job. We have won this battle. Admiral Reinhardt smiled. Nothing can be 100% perfect, and the German Navy can win this decisive naval battle at a small price, which has already made him very satisfied. In this naval battle, the German Navy lost 1 battleship, while 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. As for light cruisers and destroyers, 7 and 15 were sunk respectively. Such a loss is not small. However, compared with the results they achieved, this is undoubtedly a bit insignificant. British Navy in this naval battle, 22 battleships and 5 battle cruisers were sunk, and another 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. In terms of cruisers and destroyers, the losses were extremely heavy. It can be said that the most elite part of the Royal Navy has been wiped out by the German Navy. Next, the Royal Navy could only hide in the port and linger on. Facing the attack of the German Navy, they had nothing to do. Your Excellency, the British now generally have 7 battleships and 1 battle cruiser left, although almost all of these battleships have been severely damaged. However, with the British shipbuilding capabilities, they will soon be able to repair these warships. At that time, this will still be a threat to us. Lieutenant General Maximilian von Spee said. Admiral Reinhard Scheer nodded. But, no matter what, we have already killed the main battleship of the British. The next few warships are relatively much easier to deal with. I believe if the Imperial Navy can get rid of their main fleet, they will also be able to get rid of their remaining warships. From now on, the broken fleet will resume the blockade of Britain, and no supplies will be able to flow into the UK. Without those supplies, it will be very difficult for the British to build new warships. After the army has dealt with the British and French allied forces, the next step is to land in the UK. By then, the British will be completely lost. Yes, Your Excellency Commander. Both Lieutenant General Hipper and Lieutenant General Spee nodded. Report the news of our victory to the country. The UK is waiting in a hurry, Admiral Reinhard Scheer said. Lieutenant General Hipper and Lieutenant General Spee both laughed. Germany is also very concerned about this naval battle concerning whether Germany can replace Britain and become the hegemony of the sea. This is directly related to whether Germany can win this war. Germany has prepared carefully for so many years, and now it has finally won the final victory point. Berlin, Germany, inside the Imperial Palace, German Kaiser Wilhelm II, Crown Prince Qin Tian, Prime Minister Bernhard von Bülow, Foreign Minister von Kidron-Wascht, Minister of the Navy Marshal Tirpitz, Minister of War Marshal von Falkenhayn and the Chief of the General Staff gathered in William II's office. Since the battle broke out, they have been anxiously waiting for the final result. Although, Qin Tian and Marshal Earl Tirpitz repeatedly assured that the German Navy had gained already the absolute upper hand in this battle, and the final victory must belong to them. However, everyone can't help but feel a little worried. Although the German Navy has a great advantage, no one can guarantee whether there will be any unexpected factors in the naval battle. In that case, Germany's easy victory may slip away. Therefore, before getting the final definite news, everyone dare not take it lightly. From the morning until the afternoon, the sun went down, but there was still no news, which made everyone a little anxious. Although, they know that it is very normal for a large-scale naval battle to last for a day, and it may even last longer. However, everyone is a little anxious, which is understandable. After entertaining everyone for a light meal, William II continued to wait for news. The waiter had already served the coffee. Obviously, without waiting for the final result, everyone didn't even have the mind to sleep. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Marshal von Pohl, Chief of Staff of the Imperial Navy, rushed to the palace to report the emergency situation of the Navy to Wilhelm II. Did we win? Wilhelm II looked expectantly at Marshal von Bohr. At the same time, there are some apprehensions in my heart. He was also a little scared that he would hear bad news next. After all, the British maritime hegemony is not so easy to challenge. For hundreds of years, several countries have fallen on the way to compete with the British for maritime supremacy. Although Germany was close to winning this time, William II was somewhat worried. Your Majesty, we have won. We have won. The High Seas Fleet defeated the British in this naval battle. Marshal von Pohl said. Win? We won. William II was stunned, as if shocked by the good news. Other people also cheered. Everyone knows what this victory means to Germany. Chapter 462. The New Overlord. We have won against England. God bless the German Empire. William II roared excitedly, as if only in this way could he release the excitement in his heart. Your Majesty, from now on, we have replaced the British Empire and become the new maritime overlord. Marshal Earl Tirpitz was also very excited. The German Navy can be said to have been created by him. It has always been his goal to defeat the British Navy and replace them as the sea supremacy. Now, his goal has finally been achieved. The other ministers were also beaming with joy. The German Navy defeated the United Kingdom and replaced the United Kingdom as the maritime hegemony. This is of great benefit to the entire German Empire. At least, after the Navy wins, it represents that they are one step closer to the final victory of this war. Your Majesty, the Navy has defeated the British, so our blockade of Britain will continue. Next, the Imperial Army will launch an offensive on the Western Front within a week, completely defeating the British and French allied forces. Von Falkenhayn the Marshal also said. The loudness of the Navy is undoubtedly a stimulus to the army. Of course, this is undoubtedly of great help to the improvement of the morale of the troops. In addition, the German army has been resting for half a year on the Western Front. 8 group armies, more than 1.8 million elite troops, have completed their preparations. Among other things, just 8 armored divisions and more than 2,000 tanks will allow them to break through the defense lines of the British and French allied forces in future wars and win victory. William II nodded. The Navy's victory also brought him great confidence. Very well, I believe that this time the Imperial Army will also be able to win on the Western Front. William II said confidently. Your Excellency, Marshal, what is the loss of the Imperial Navy in this naval battle? What are the specific results? Qin Tian asked. When everyone was cheering for the victory of the Imperial Navy, Qin Tian was also very excited. However, he wanted to know more about the specific situation. After all, a tragic victory is also a victory. If it was just a tragic victory, it would be more troublesome for Germany. However, Qin Tian also believes that, given the huge advantage and the fact that even aircraft carriers are participating in the battle, even if the Imperial Navy wants to win the final victory, it will definitely not be a miserable victory. His Royal Highness, the Imperial Navy sank 22 British battleships and 5 battle cruisers in this battle, and the other 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. If it wasn't dark, the Imperial Navy can definitely sink all the warships of the British. In addition, the Imperial Navy also sank more than 20 light cruisers and more than 60 destroyers. It can be said that the most elite main combat force of the Royal Navy, they have all been wiped out by us. Marshal von Pohl said proudly. Qin Tian and the others could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. It seems that the tragic victory they were worried about did not happen. In this naval battle of the Imperial Navy, 1 battleship was sunk, and 3 other battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. Although the other capital ships were also hit by some shells, overall, they were not serious. The battleship that was sunk was Thuringia. The battleships that were hit hard were Saxony, Nassau and Grand Kurfürst, and the battle cruiser that was hit hard was Hindenburg. No. In addition, we were also sunk 7 light cruisers and 15 destroyers. Overall, the losses of the Imperial Navy in this naval battle were not large, especially compared with the results we obtained. These losses are, it seems, insignificant. Marshal von Bohr continued. A smile appeared on Qin Tian's face. The heart that he had been hanging on for a long time finally returned to his stomach. The Imperial Navy did win this naval battle at a small cost. This allowed the Imperial Navy to remain strong enough to deter other countries after the naval battle. The Imperial Navy is also strong enough to secure the blockade of Britain and to conduct landing operations on the British mainland in the future. The others were even more excited. The victory of the Imperial Navy and the victory of the Imperial Navy at a small cost are completely different things. Very good, very good. The Imperial Navy played very well this time. William II was very happy. Your Majesty, from now on, we have become a veritable maritime supremacy. The navies of other countries can no longer compete with the Imperial Navy. Marshal Count Tirpitz continued. William II nodded, and it was under his support that the German Navy developed. Now, the German Navy can defeat the British Navy and become the new maritime supremacy, which makes him proud. For the future of the Imperial Navy and the Empire, William II and others are full of beautiful visions. The British have controlled maritime hegemony for hundreds of years, which has enabled them to occupy a large number of colonies and seize huge wealth all over the world. If Germany can take all of this from the hands of the British, Germany's takeoff will be just around the corner. Although the Imperial Navy defeated the British, we still cannot underestimate the strength of the British. Although their capital ships were severely damaged by us, they can be repaired in at most 2 months. By then, those battleships can still pose a threat to us. Therefore, we have to guard against it. Qin Tian said. His Royal Highness, General Scheer has ordered that the High Seas Fleet resume its blockade of the United Kingdom. Next, it will focus on monitoring the United Kingdom. If the British Navy dares to fight, the Imperial Navy must have enough strength to destroy them. Marshal von Bohr said. Qin Tian nodded. With the current strength of the Imperial Navy, it is definitely not a big problem to deal with the remaining power of the British Navy. The British lost so badly this time, it is almost impossible to come back. No matter what, the German Navy successfully defeated the British Navy through the victory of this naval battle, pulling them down from the throne of maritime supremacy, which is a fact that no one can change. Germany will replace Britain as the new maritime hegemony. A powerful navy will ensure that Germany has the upper hand in this war. At the same time, it will also win more overseas interests for Germany. Chapter 463, Fierce Failure. For the German Navy, now is the time for them to celebrate their victory. However, for the British, the result of this naval battle was undoubtedly very frustrating. As the flagship of the Royal Navy, the battleship Revenge has been bombarded by the Germans' main artillery. The superstructure was riddled with holes, and there were scorched black marks everywhere. Even the armor below the waterline was torn apart. If the watertight compartment hadn't been closed in time, the battleship Revenge might have been sunk. Even so, it can be clearly seen that the hull has tilted to a certain extent. The other battleship Resolution is not much bigger than the battleship Revenge. The hull was also damaged during the fierce battle, and there were holes everywhere. Even two of the four twin 381mm main guns were destroyed. This time he was able to escape from the dead. It was pure luck. On the bridge of the battleship Revenge, Admiral John Jellicoe and Lieutenant Admiral David Beatty looked desperate. The naval battle that happened today was completely like a nightmare to them. However, whether they are willing to accept such a result or not, this naval battle is over. The winner has already been decided. The British Royal Navy lost a complete defeat in this naval battle. It's over. The Royal Navy is over. The British Empire is also completely over. Admiral John Jellicoe looked frustrated and remorseful. As the commander of the Grand Fleet, he naturally had an inescapable responsibility for the defeat of the Royal Navy. He is not afraid of taking responsibility. Even if he is sent to a military court, he has no complaints. It's just that watching the hegemony of the Royal Navy fall from their hands, it made him feel very guilty. He knew very well what the strength of the British Empire came from. After losing sea power, can the overseas colonies of the British Empire be kept? Without overseas colonies, it is naturally impossible for Britain to continue to be strong. It is almost certain to be reduced to a second-rate country. Your Excellency, Commander, don't blame yourself too much. We have tried our best in this battle. The reason why we were still defeated by the Germans is not because of us. It is because the Germans are too powerful, and it is our fault. There was a fundamental mistake in thinking about warships. This caused our warships to be suppressed by the German Navy from the very beginning. From the beginning of the war to the present, we have been losing. We lost a large number of warships, and finally lost in the war a crushing defeat. Lieutenant General David Beatty said. Admiral John Jellicoe nodded. Indeed, the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy have done their best in this naval battle. However, they still lost in the end, and they lost so badly that the British Empire might not have any chance of winning in this war. This made him always have a deep sense of guilt. We can no longer compete with the Germans for sea power. It is even foreseeable that after the Germans have won the land battlefield on the Western Front, they will launch an attack on our homeland. Unfortunately, there is no power to stop the Germans. The flames of war will inevitably burn our country, and I don't know how many people will die in the war. Admiral John Jellicoe sighed. Your Excellency, Commander, there is no way. We are soldiers, and our bounden duty is to obey orders. We have done our best in this war. Then, the next thing is not what we are considering. I think those politicians in the country know what to do. If you don't want the flames of war to burn to our homeland, you have to accept the harsh armistice conditions of the Germans. It is impossible for the Empire to accept the conditions of the Germans, so in the end it is estimated that there are still only one of course. If the British and French allied forces can resist the German attack on the Western Front, perhaps everything will turn around. Lieutenant General David Beatty said. The Anglo-French coalition resisted the German attack. Is that possible? Admiral John Jellicoe couldn't help shaking his head. Although, he is the general of the Navy. However, he also knows the situation of the army. Compared with the German army, the combat effectiveness of the British and French allied forces is far behind. Especially after Germany has won victory on the Eastern Front, the German army will go west with all its strength. Under such circumstances, can the British and French allied forces withstand it? Admiral John Jellicoe, at least, is not very optimistic about this. However, as Lieutenant General David Beatty said, these things are not their concern at all. Now they are nothing but defeated generals. Those domestic politicians will naturally consider how to solve the current mess. Your Excellency, Commander, Your Excellency Chief of Staff. The telegram has been drafted. Can it be sent? A staff officer asked. Calculating the time, we have been free from the Germans for nearly 2 hours. Even if we send a telegram, they will not be able to detect it, Lieutenant General David Beatty said. Before, they did not dare to send a telegram to the country immediately after getting rid of the German Navy because they were afraid that the German Navy would catch up. In that case, they are dead. Now that the crisis is almost over, it is natural to send telegrams. Let's send it. His Excellency Churchill must have been waiting very anxiously. It's a pity that this time we did not bring victory to the British Empire, but a disastrous defeat. However, this should also be known in the country, so that they can do it earlier. Get ready, said Admiral John Jellicoe. Yes, Your Excellency, Commander. The staff officer immediately went to send a telegram. UK London, Admiralty. Although, it's almost 10 o'clock in the evening. However, Churchill did not leave his office, but continued to stay here. Not for anything else, just to wait for the final result of the decisive battle between the Royal Navy of the British Empire and the German Navy. Although Churchill knew very well that with the strength of the Royal Navy's large fleet, it would be very difficult to win. However, he now only wants the Grand Fleet to fight the Germans and lose both sides. In this case, his follow-up opportunities can be implemented. At that time, it is still unknown who will win the deer. Why is there no news so far? There should be no surprises. May God bless the British Empire and hope our plan can succeed. It would be the best if we can defeat the Germans. No matter how bad it is, we must fight with them. It will hurt both sides. Churchill prayed secretly. Chapter 464. The UK is over. Just when Churchill was getting impatient, there was a knock on the door of his office. Suddenly, Churchill was shocked. At the same time, there are some apprehensions in my heart. After all, he was worried what if it was bad news, so what should I do now? Come in. Churchill shouted to the door. The secretary opened the door and walked in. Churchill looked at the secretary's face, trying to see some problems from his face. Churchill could clearly sense that the secretary was pretending to be calm. But in fact, the panic in his eyes had completely betrayed him. Did the British Empire fail again this time? However, we couldn't beat the Germans, and failure is normal. As long as we can hit the Germans hard, then our plan will come true. Churchill said, comfort yourself. In his view, it is almost impossible for the Royal Navy to defeat the German Navy. However, if you want to fight the German Navy to the death, then it should not be a big problem. Therefore, Churchill was still somewhat optimistic about this naval battle. However, after seeing the secretary's expression now, he suddenly felt a little uncertain. He also faintly felt that something unexpected happened. Your Excellency, this is a telegram from the Grand Fleet Command, the secretary said. Churchill nodded. Put it here. After the secretary put down the telegram, he immediately turned and left, as if he wanted to escape from here. This made Churchill stunned. But at the same time, this also made the shrewd him guess something, which made his heart sink continuously. Alas, it seems that our loss this time will be greater than expected. However, the reality is the reality, and no one can change it. Churchill sighed, then picked up the telegram on the table, and read it carefully up. It's just that Churchill's face turned pale when he saw half of the telegram. The loss of the Royal Navy in this naval battle in the telegram made him deeply hit. Damn. How did we lose so many warships? What's going on? John Jellicoe and David Beatty, what are they doing? Churchill roared angrily. 22 battleships, 5 battle cruisers were sunk, and another 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. In addition to the sunk cruisers and destroyers, the essence of the Royal Navy was completely destroyed in this battle. This is undoubtedly a heavy blow to the Royal Navy. It can even be said that the backbone of the Royal Navy was interrupted in this battle. The loss of so many warships certainly caused the Royal Navy a lot of losses. However, no matter how many battleships are lost, they can be rebuilt. As long as there is a chance, with the strength of British shipbuilding, it can be completely rebuilt. Among other things, those battleships and battle cruisers that are being built over time in the shipyard, once they are in service, can restore the strength of the Royal Navy and even take it to a higher level. Of course, the prerequisite is that Britain has the ability to obtain the resources to build these warships. Otherwise, the battleships would not have been completed. However, the Royal Navy has lost so many elite sailors in this battle. Even with warships, they cannot fully display the combat power of these warships. Therefore, this is undoubtedly a fatal blow to the Royal Navy. It is easy to build a warship, but it is not so easy to train a qualified naval soldier. I don't know how long it will take for the elite sailors lost this time to recover. Although Churchill knew that the British Navy would definitely lose this time, he never thought that it would lose so badly. In addition to those capital ships that were severely damaged, the British Navy now only has 7 battleships and 1 battle cruiser, namely the battleship Dreadnought, the battleship Giant, the battleship Queen Elizabeth, and the battleship Warspite battleships, battleship Warrior, battleship Revenge and battleship Resolution, and battlecruiser Tiger. Among them, except for the battleship Fearless, which was intact, the rest of the battleships were severely damaged in the naval battle. If they wanted to restore their combat effectiveness, they would have to stay in the shipyard for at least 2 months or even longer. The remaining battleships seem to be quite a few, but compared with the German Navy, it is far inferior. Even, this caused the Royal Navy's ranking in the world to drop from 1st to 3rd or even 4th. This is undoubtedly unacceptable to the British Empire, which has been the overlord of the sea for hundreds of years. We have lost so many capital ships. What about the Germans? It would be great if we could cause the same amount of losses to the Germans. In this way, we can rely on many pre-dreadnoughts to compete with the Germans' domination of the sea. Relying on the number of pre-dreadnoughts, we may not lose to the British, Churchill thought. As if he had grasped the last straw, he quickly flipped through the next telegram, trying to find the loss of the German Navy recorded above. However, when he found the relevant content, he couldn't help being stunned. How is it possible? We lost so many battleships, but only sank 1 battleship of the Germans, and severely damaged several of their battleships. 27-1. How could it be like this? Could it be that we has the gap with the Germans reach such a point? Such a battle damage ratio made Churchill completely speechless, and even made him a little desperate for the future. Churchill has always been a very determined person. Otherwise, he would not be valued by Prime Minister Asquith and become the Secretary of the Navy. Even when the Royal Navy was at a disadvantage, Churchill was not discouraged, but actively tried to find ways to get the Royal Navy out of trouble. But now, the result of this naval battle made Churchill no longer have much confidence. It can be seen how hard this failure has hit them. It's over. This is completely over. The Royal Navy will never have a chance to come back. The British Empire will also lose completely in this war. By then, the British Empire will probably cease to exist. Churchill murmured. Obviously, the failure of the Royal Navy this time was undoubtedly a fatal blow to the British Empire, making it even more difficult for them to win the war. Once it fails, the British Empire will cease to exist in the style of the Germans. Chapter 465. Anxiety. Come on, prepare the car. I'm going to the Prime Minister's office. Churchill sat on the chair for a long time after reading the telegram. After that, he shouted to the secretary outside the door. Yes, Your Excellency. The secretary hurried to get ready. He knew that Churchill must be in anger now. Therefore, he did not dare to anger Churchill. In that case, there will definitely be no good fruit to eat. A few minutes later, Churchill got into the car and went to the Prime Minister's office. When Churchill arrived at the Prime Minister's office, it was already 12 o'clock in the middle of the night. Prime Minister Asquith had already rested. Although, the decisive battle between the Royal Navy and the German Navy is a major event related to the fate of the British Empire. But Prime Minister Asquith was getting old, so he couldn't stand it any longer, so he took a rest early. Churchill, what's the matter? Has the naval battle ended? Prime Minister Asquith asked anxiously in his pajamas. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, I'm sorry, we failed. Churchill said with a painful expression. Failed? Did we really fail? Prime Minister Asquith suddenly sat down on the sofa. Although he had expected such a result a long time ago. But in his heart, he undoubtedly hoped that the Royal Navy could perform miracles and defeat the mighty Germans. In that case, the British Empire may win the war. Winning the war and being defeated are two completely different endings. If the glory of the British Empire wants to continue to be maintained, it must find ways to win this war. Otherwise, the British Empire would cease to exist. As for peace talks, make peace with the Germans and end this war decently. That has proven unlikely. The conditions put forward by the Germans last time were very harsh, and it was absolutely impossible for the British Empire to accept such conditions. That's why the British cabinet was determined to continue the war at that time, in an attempt to win on the battlefield, so as to preserve the interests of the British Empire. But now it seems that the performance of their army on the battlefield is still too bad. Your Excellency Churchill, how much has the loss been? How much loss have we caused to the Germans? Prime Minister Asquith asked. In his heart, there are still some expectations. If the losses of the Royal Navy were not too great, and they also caused relatively serious losses to the Germans, then they would undoubtedly not have lost badly in this naval battle. Churchill understood what Prime Minister Asquith meant, but this time he was destined to be disappointed. I'm sorry, Your Excellency. This time, the Royal Navy lost a lot. Almost all the capital ships that participated in the battle were lost. According to the battle report sent back by the Grand Fleet, 22 of our battleships and 5 battle cruisers were shot down by the Germans. Shen. Another 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. The cruisers and destroyers also suffered heavy losses. However, the losses we caused to the Germans were very slight. We only sank 1 German. In addition, several battleships and battle cruisers were severely damaged. The losses of the German cruisers and destroyers were much smaller than ours. Churchill said bravely. What? We have lost so much, but we have caused very little loss to the Germans. How is this possible? How can the Germans be so much better than us? Prime Minister Asquith obviously couldn't accept this result. After all, this is too hard to believe. You know, before the outbreak of this war, the Royal Navy of the British Empire was still the overlord of the sea, the symbol of the most powerful sea power in the world. Although the German Navy is catching up, there is undoubtedly a big gap in order to catch up with the Royal Navy. But now, the Germans have beaten the Royal Navy of the British Empire to the ground through a few naval battles, and even the backbone of the Royal Navy has been interrupted. Such a result would definitely be unacceptable to anyone. Mr. Churchill, are you joking, right? Although we failed, the loss must not be so great. Prime Minister Asquith asked. How he wished Churchill was joking. In that case, the main force of the Royal Navy still exists, Your Excellency. I also really want to make this joke. But unfortunately, this is not a joke. It is a fact. The Royal Navy has indeed lost a complete defeat in this naval battle. We have nothing to do with it. There is no other way, Churchill said. The look of hope in Prime Minister Asquith's eyes disappeared immediately. It's over. It's completely over. The British Empire is over this time. Prime Minister Asquith couldn't help but said. Churchill was silent, and he also believed that Britain is now truly in crisis. If you don't pay attention, you will fall into a place of eternal doom. The Navy failed to achieve the set goals, which makes us very likely to lose in this war. In this case, what should we do? Can we preserve the core interests of the British Empire? Our Prime Minister Asquith murmured. Although, as the Prime Minister of the British Empire, he was once considered the most powerful person in the world. But now, when the British Empire is facing life and death, all the halo on him has faded away, replaced by panic and anxiety. If Britain loses this war, Prime Minister Asquith and all cabinet members will probably become sinners. At the same time, this also means that the power they have been enjoying for a long time will leave them. Such a result undoubtedly made them very unacceptable. Your Excellency, the Royal Navy failed your expectations. I'm really very sorry, Churchill said. Churchill, this is none of your business, and it's not even the reason for the Royal Navy. It's not that the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy don't fight to the death, but that the Germans are too powerful. Over the years, there have been problems with the development of the Royal Navy, so that our Navy was overtaken by the Germans and passed us. It was no one's fault, Prime Minister Asquith said. Churchill nodded. Indeed, it is obviously inappropriate to attribute the responsibility to someone for this failure. However, losing is losing, and the British Empire is in a more difficult predicament because of this, and no one can change it. Come on, call the other cabinet members immediately and discuss what we should do next. Prime Minister Asquith ordered. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466, Not Reconciled. The ministers of the British cabinet, after receiving a call from the Prime Minister's office, got out of the warm quilt one by one, got into the car, and rushed to the Prime Minister's office. Everyone knows that Prime Minister Asquith would not have summoned them in the middle of the night if there had not been an emergency. What's more, the Royal Navy seems to be in a decisive battle with the Germans. Therefore, the purpose of Prime Minister Asquith summoning them was naturally obvious. I hope the Royal Navy can win this naval battle. If it is defeated, then the British Empire will be in trouble, or big asterisk trouble. Sir Edward Grey sat in his car, worried. There are many people who have the same idea as Sir Edward Grey. As British cabinet ministers, they are undoubtedly aware of the severe situation facing the British Empire. If they can win the naval battle, then the British Empire has the possibility of winning the war. Even though they lost a lot of national power in this war, they were still able to linger on. If the Royal Navy loses, it's all over. In less than half an hour, the British cabinet ministers arrived at the Prime Minister's office. Everyone, it is really a last resort to call you here at such a late hour. His Excellency Churchill will first inform you of the results of the naval battle. Prime Minister Asquith's look of distress naturally made the cabinet ministers suddenly there is a bad feeling. Churchill stood up and saw that everyone's eyes fell on him, and he immediately felt great pressure. Everyone, I have a very bad news to tell you, Churchill said. This made all the cabinet members frown tightly together. Obviously, the Royal Navy has lost this time, and everyone has guessed the result. In the naval battle that just ended, the Royal Navy failed to defeat the Germans and win the naval battle. Instead, it suffered heavy losses in the naval battle and lost the naval battle. In the naval battle, 22 battleships and 5 battle cruisers were sunk by the Royal Navy. Another 3 battleships and 1 battle cruiser were severely damaged. Losses of the cruisers and destroyers were also very large. After paying a heavy price, we only sank 1 battleship of the Germans and severely damaged them, just a few battleships and battle cruisers. Churchill bit the bullet and informed everyone about the situation. As soon as Churchill finished speaking, the conference room heard the sound of people breathing one after another. Obviously, everyone expected that the Royal Navy would lose so badly, but they didn't expect to lose so badly. Your Excellency Churchill, the loss of so many capital ships has only caused very small losses to the Germans. How can we continue to fight this battle? Minister of War Richard Haldane looked angry. You know, there are now more than 1 million expeditionary troops fighting in France. The Royal Navy has suffered such a big defeat, which will undoubtedly hand over the dominance of the sea to the hands of the Germans. At that time, it may not be so easy for them to ensure the safety of the sea transportation line from Britain to France. In addition, once the British and French allied forces cannot withstand the German attack on the Western Front, the sea channel will be cut off, which will directly prevent the British Expeditionary Force from returning to the British mainland. Mr. Haldane, the Royal Navy has done its best in this battle. We were defeated by the Germans not because the officers and soldiers of the Royal Navy were greedy for life and fear of death. In order to defeat the Germans, we have tried our best. However, the Germans so powerful that we ended up failing badly, Churchill explained. Richard Haldane opened his mouth, wanting to say something more. However, nothing was said in the end. After all, he also knew that the failure this time could not be entirely blamed on the Royal Navy, who made the Royal Navy's previous development ideas go wrong. This makes the capital ships of the Royal Navy completely unable to compare with the German Navy in single ship performance. In this naval battle, he was beaten by the German Navy and suffered heavy losses. Now that the Royal Navy has failed, it is meaningless to pursue responsibility. Your Excellency, the Royal Navy failed in this naval battle. So, according to the plan drawn up by Your Excellency Churchill, do we still have a chance to come back? Asked Lloyd George, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Churchill shook his head. Our capital ship is completely lost, and the losses we caused to the Germans are very small, although we still have dozens of pre-dreadnoughts. However, the combat effectiveness of those pre-dreadnoughts, very poor. In front of the new German battleships, they are simply vulnerable. If they are allowed to deal with the Germans according to the previous plan, they will be sent to their deaths. Suddenly, all the cabinet ministers fell silent. They all knew that the Royal Navy suffered a terrible defeat this time, and at the same time, they failed to complete the established combat objectives, which would prevent them from defeating the German Navy and regaining sea dominance as planned. Even after the disastrous defeat of the Royal Navy, the security of the mainland was seriously threatened. If the German army wins on the Western Front and defeats France, if Britain does not accept the harsh conditions of the Germans, the German army will definitely land in the British Isles. At that time, the entire British Isles will be caught in the flames of war. Such a terrible result made the cabinet ministers of the British Empire pale. Your Excellency, since the Navy has failed, then, other chances of winning this war are almost zero. In order to prevent the mainland from falling into the flames of war, we may negotiate with the Germans to end the war. Edward, the Foreign Secretary, Sir Grey suggested. However, the conditions put forward by the Germans are too harsh. If their conditions are agreed, the British Empire will cease to exist. No matter how much profit is lost, it is much better than the mainland being turned into a piece of scorched earth in the German attack. With the defeat of the Royal Navy, more and more cabinet ministers began to think about whether they should hold peace talks with the Germans. Of course, the peace talks will lose a lot of benefits, but if the mainland is caught in a war, it is also not what they want to see. Although the conditions of the Germans are very harsh, we can bargain with them. Seeing that the cabinet ministers were more and more inclined to hold peace talks with the Germans, Churchill was very unwilling. He didn't want the British Empire to be brought down by the Germans like this. Chapter 467. Churchill's plan. Everyone, it is too early to prepare for peace talks with the Germans. After all, once we have peace talks with the Germans, with their greedy character, they will definitely take this opportunity to open their mouths and blackmail more people. Interests. At that time, the British Empire will no longer exist, Churchill said. The ministers nodded again and again, and they all believed that Churchill was right. However, if there is no compromise, is it possible to just watch the flames of war burn in the British Empire? For them, this is undoubtedly an unacceptable result. Your Excellency Churchill, what should we do if the Germans land on our mainland? Sir Edward Grey asked. Your Excellency, it will not be so easy for the Germans to land on the mainland of the British Empire. First, they need to defeat the British and French allied forces. Then, they need to cross the strait to attack the mainland of the empire. Although, the German army is the best in the world. However, the Anglo-French coalition forces are also not so easy to deal with. The number of expeditionary troops we have sent to the European continent has already exceeded 1 million. The strength of the French army has also expanded to more than 2 million. In this case, the British-French coalition forces, the total strength of the German army is more than 3 million. I'm afraid that the total strength of the German army is not so large. No matter how powerful the Germans are, it is undoubtedly very difficult to defeat us when their strength is far inferior to ours. Difficult. Churchill analyzed. Your Excellency Haldane, is there a high chance that the British and French coalition forces will resist the German attack? Prime Minister Asquith asked. Your Excellency, the French claim to be 70% sure of resisting the German attack, but I think they are too optimistic. In my opinion, we have at most 50% sure of resisting the German attack. As His Excellency Churchill said, as I said, it is not easy for the Germans to defeat us. After all, we have deployed heavy troops on the Marne River and built strong fortifications. The quality of our soldiers is definitely not comparable to that of the Russians, therefore, it is entirely possible for us to resist the German attack. Richard Haldane said. Prime Minister Asquith nodded, seeming to be analyzing whether the British Empire should seek peace from the Germans if the British and French allied forces can withstand the German attack. After all, seeking peace would not do the British Empire any good. Even if it is a tar, it is the most beneficial. Your Excellency, what if the British and French allied forces cannot resist the German attack? At that time, the Germans may not give us the slightest chance of peace talks. Every time we lose on the battlefield, the attitude of the Germans will be inevitable. It will be tougher and the asking price will be higher. Sir Edward Grey reminded. Prime Minister Asquith was taken aback for a moment, and then nodded. For he knew that what Sir Edward Grey had said was true. If the Germans had clearly felt that victory was in sight, then they would certainly not heed the British Empire's request for peace talks. After all, after defeating the British Empire will be like meat on the chopping board, allowing them to be slaughtered. They also have absolutely no need for peace talks. Churchill saw Prime Minister Asquith's attitude and was still inclined to peace talks, so he had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue to persuade. Your Excellency, the Royal Navy has failed in this battle. However, we are not without a chance. Churchill continued. All eyes were on Churchill. The Royal Navy has always been the backbone of the British Empire. If the Royal Navy can win, then at least the homeland of the British Empire is safe. Even, it is not impossible to win the war by exhausting Germany through other methods. However, didn't the Royal Navy lose a complete defeat in this naval battle? What did they use to defeat the Germans? This also made some cabinet ministers even think that Churchill was simply bragging. Your Excellency Churchill, do you have any new plans? If the Royal Navy can defeat the Germans, that would be the best. Prime Minister Asquith said. Although, he also believes that the possibility of Churchill's success is very small. But in his heart, he still had some expectations. Churchill took a deep breath and then said, Your Excellency, the Royal Navy still has 7 battleships and 1 battle cruiser left. Although these battleships were severely damaged. However, with the shipbuilding strength of the British Empire, at most these battleships can be repaired in 2 months. Even if they work in 3 shifts, 1 month will be enough. At that time, these warships will spread out and attack the German sea transportation lines, breaking the battle, give them back everything they did to the British Empire. In this case, it will undoubtedly greatly weaken the strength of the Germans. Prime Minister Asquith nodded. The lack of local resources in Germany forced them to rely on overseas trade for a large amount of supplies. Therefore, the British Empire wanted to use the Navy to blockade Germany before, and then drag Germany to death. But it is a pity that the Royal Navy not only failed to complete this task, but put itself in it instead. I'm afraid this is not enough to defeat the Germans, right? Once the Germans dispatch their fleet to attack our broken warships, we will not be their opponents at all. The German Navy has now taken an absolute advantage. Minister of War Lee Chad Haldane questioned. Indeed, it is impossible to defeat Germany in this way. To defeat the Germans, we must ultimately rely on a strong navy. The warships we are building now require a large amount of supplies. However, the blockade imposed by the Germans makes it difficult for our warships to be built on time. Therefore, we need to have another naval battle with the Germans. Even if we lose both, we must break the blockade imposed by the Germans on us. In this way, the warships we will build later can be completed and put into service, and the strength of the Royal Navy can be restored. Churchill continued. However, the current Royal Navy simply does not have the strength to engage in a decisive battle with the Germans. Sir Edward Grey also said. Churchill nodded. It is true that the Royal Navy has suffered a lot this time. However, we can use other methods to restore the strength of the Royal Navy. In this case, we will have enough strength to fight the Germans for the first time. It's the second decisive battle. If you are lucky, winning is not impossible. Chapter 468, by warships. The ministers of the British cabinet, including Prime Minister Asquith, all looked at Churchill, wondering what he could do to quickly restore the strength of the Royal Navy. After all, it takes almost 2 years for a capital ship to start construction and enter service. Even if you work overtime, a year and a half is always indispensable. And the Germans obviously won't give them so much time. Churchill naturally knew where everyone's doubts were, so he continued to explain. He knew that, if his plan was to succeed, he had to obtain the approval of all members of the cabinet. Otherwise, his plan is absolutely impossible to succeed. Your Excellency Prime Minister, Your Excellency Ministers. There are only 7 battleships and 1 battle cruiser left in the Royal Navy. It is impossible and unrealistic to fight the Germans. However, we can use other methods, strengthen the strength of the Royal Navy. For example, buy warships from other countries. Churchill said. Buy a warship? How is this possible? All the ministers were stunned. You must know that when it was the maritime supremacy in the past, other countries have always purchased warships from the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom has never purchased warships like other countries. What's more, under the current situation, which other country can provide them with warships, and provide a large number of warships that can compete with the capital ships of the German Navy? Your Excellency Churchill, which country can we buy warships from? Sir Edward Grey asked. The United States. Now only the United States has enough warships to sell to us. Churchill said. Americans? Although their shipbuilding industry is very developed, if they want to provide us with warships, the distant water will not be able to quench our thirst. Richard Haldane said. Churchill nodded. Indeed, if we place an order with the Americans now, it will be too late. Therefore, we'd better be able to buy their active warships. If we can buy all 12 of their active battleships down, this will restore the Royal Navy to more than half its strength. How could they sell the American battleships in active service to me? If they sell them to us, what about their own coastal defense? Some cabinet ministers immediately raised questions. With the barrier of the Atlantic Ocean, the mainland of the United States is undoubtedly safe. What's more, according to the information we have received, after the outbreak of the war, the Americans have begun to build a series of new warships. Selling the old warships to us, or it is conducive to their return of funds and the construction of more new battleships. In this case, it is also of great benefit to the Americans. Now the United States is a neutral country, and they did not participate in the war. Therefore, even if the Germans are very happy about this or not, there is nothing to do with the Americans. It is impossible for the Germans to cross the Atlantic to attack the United States, let alone whether the Germans have such a great ability. At least this is very uneconomical. Even if the Germans finally won this game, victory in the war will inevitably lead to exhaustion. At that time, where will they have extra energy to deal with the Americans? It is very possible that the Americans will sell those warships to us without any worries. Churchill said. Everyone. What's more, the Americans have always been ambitious. If we can continue the war with the Germans, it will undoubtedly be of great benefit to them. Otherwise, once the Germans easily obtain with the victory of this war, the strength will inevitably expand to a situation that makes the Americans worry. At that time, it will be impossible for the Americans to dominate the Americans. Therefore, for their own interests, the Americans must also. It will help us get through this time. Churchill said. Your Excellency, this is very possible. Before the war broke out, the Germans and the Americans were competing for South America, and the two countries were very unhappy about it. The Americans have always regarded South America as their own back garden, absolutely not allow other countries to get involved. And the Germans need more markets and sources of raw materials, which makes the two countries almost irreconcilable contradictions. For the sake of the future, the possibility of the Americans helping we are very high. Colonial Secretary Lewis said. Vernon Harcourt. In this case, then contact the Americans and let them sell those warships to us. Prime Minister Asquith said. As long as there is a slight chance of defeating the Germans, they will not let it go easily. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. A trace of excitement flashed in Churchill's eyes. He is not a person who is willing to admit defeat easily. Even in the current predicament, he is always thinking about defeating Germany and winning. Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Excellency, the Americans are not a good thing either. Now that we ask them, they will definitely not miss this opportunity. I'm worried that the Americans will put forward some conditions that we cannot accept at all. In addition, our finances don't allow us to spend so much money to buy warships. Lloyd George reminded. A group of ministers nodded repeatedly. No doubt they also look down on Americans. Even if the industrial output value of the United States becomes the first in the world, it is just regarded as an upstart by them. In addition, the United Kingdom has always been unwilling to make a country formed by the descendants of criminals surpass them, so it has been looking for trouble for the United States. If it weren't for the sudden emergence of Germany, the United Kingdom is still suppressing the United States. You don't need to think about it, the US government will naturally not give up this good opportunity. After all, the United States is the only country in the world that can provide these warships to Britain. Therefore, there is almost no doubt that they will definitely slaughter Britain civilly. As long as we can defeat the Germans, no matter how much we pay, it will be worth it. If we don't have enough funds, we can even transfer some unimportant colonies to the Americans in exchange for these warships. Churchill's attitude resolute. How can it be possible to transfer the colonies to the Americans? Those colonies are the foundation of the British Empire. Colonial Secretary Lewis Vernon Harcourt immediately objected. He was in favor of buying American warships, but not in exchange for colonies. We are just exchanging unimportant colonies with the Americans. It is impossible to give the truly elite colonies to the Americans. What's more, if we don't try our best to win the war, if we lose, those colonies will also the same cannot be done, Churchill said. Prime Minister Asquith hesitated for a while, but finally nodded. The defeat of the Germans is the most important thing, and the rest can be temporarily abandoned. Chapter 469, The United Fleet of the Three Kingdoms. Britain has the most extensive colonies in the world, from Africa to Asia, and then to America. Wherever the sun shines, there is their land. Therefore, Britain is also known as the empire on which the sun never sets. The rest of the world covets Britain's vast colonies, especially Germany and the United States, as the two rising powers. By the time they rose up, the world had been almost divided up, and they just picked up bits and pieces that others didn't want. Watching countries such as Britain and France relying on their vast colonies to plunder a lot of wealth. But they can only work hard to develop industry and economy, which naturally makes Germany and the United States very unbalanced. At the end of the 19th century, the Americans chose the decadent and backward Kingdom of Spain as their target, and took Cuba and the Philippines from the Kingdom of Spain as their colonies. As for Germany, its appetite is greater than that of the United States, and it directly targets Britain and France. If Britain and France can be defeated in the war, then all the colonies belonging to these two countries will belong to Germany. This will make Germany the #1 colonial power in the world. Although the industry of the United States is developed, its military strength is far from that of Germany. Therefore, the Americans can only look enviously at the war launched by Germany. Of course, for the benefit of the United States, the Americans naturally do not want Germany to win the war. In that case, a strong Germany is of no benefit to the United States. Therefore, the Americans will engage in small actions in private to support Britain and France against Germany. However, Britain and France are like fools who cannot be supported. Even though the United States has invested huge sums of money, they still suffered a complete defeat on the battlefield. And seeing that they are about to be defeated, this naturally makes the Americans very anxious. British Prime Minister Asquith knew very well that overseas colonies are the foundation of the British Empire and their most precious wealth. Without these colonies, the British Empire would cease to exist. However, when the war was about to be lost, Prime Minister Asquith was also willing to use these colonies as bargaining chips in exchange for more possibilities for the British Empire to win. Churchill, we can transfer some colonies to the United States in exchange for their warships. However, I hope it is the worst colony. Our core colonies must not be given to the Americans. In addition, the Americans will definitely be a lion it is open. It is necessary to reduce the loss of the British Empire as much as possible. Prime Minister Asquith said. Yes, Your Excellency the Prime Minister. Churchill nodded. Prime Minister Asquith was able to let go, which made him very satisfied. At least, with the support of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, his plan can go ahead. If those capital ships can be obtained from the Americans, the Royal Navy will have the strength to confront Germany again. Your Excellency Churchill, the Americans only have 12 new type battleships. Even if we add these 12 new type battleships, we only have 20 battleships, right? Compared with the Germans, the gap is still too big. Minister of War Richard Haldane said. Yeah. We had more battleships than the Germans before, and we couldn't defeat them. Not to mention that we have fewer battleships than them now. What should we do if we fail again? The Colonial Secretary also proposed questioned. Prime Minister Asquith immediately looked at Churchill, and he did not want to lose again, after investing a huge amount of money this time. In that case, it will undoubtedly be in vain, Your Excellency. The American battleships are different from ours. Our battleships focus on speed and firepower, and despise defense. This design idea has been proved to be wrong. The Americans are focusing on defense and firepower, a design that underestimates speed. This makes the overall performance of American warships no worse than that of Germans. When we are in a decisive battle with the Germans, we don't have to worry about those aspects, Churchill said. In addition to purchasing warships from the Americans, we can also ask the French Navy to cooperate with us in combat. The French Navy's capital ships have served 10 ships so far, including 4 Calbe E-class, that is, isolated Bat-class, battleships, 3 Brittany-class battleships, and the first 3 of the Normandy-class battleships. At such a critical juncture, the French Navy should cooperate with us in fighting together. If we are defeated, they will also fail. In this case, adding the 10 battleships of the French Navy, we will have 30 capital ships. At least in terms of the number of capital ships, it is not much different from the Germans. Churchill continued. Besides that, there is the Italian Navy. They also have several battleships, including the Dante, 3 Cava-class battleships and 2 Duirio-class battleships. If we can join in, then we will be able to assemble 36 battleships. This is no less than the Germans in terms of quantity. It is also not inferior to them in quality. If our luck is a little bit better, we can defeat German people. It is not. Churchill confessed his impossible plan for the multinational naval joint fleet. In fact, before the start of this naval battle, Churchill was thinking about how to make a comeback if the Royal Navy lost. Originally, he also expected that, even if the Royal Navy lost, it would cause heavy casualties to the Germans. But now it seems that the Germans are stronger than he thought. When he was about to give up this plan for a while, he was unwilling to surrender to the Germans, so he decided to give this opportunity a try. This is the only plan to deal with the Germans that can be thought of at present. The British cabinet ministers are very interested in the plan proposed by Churchill. This is mainly because they are really unwilling to bow to the Germans. If you can defeat the Germans, no matter how much you pay, it will undoubtedly be worth it. It may be very difficult to buy warships from the Americans while uniting the French and Italians, said Prime Minister Asquith. Your Excellency, no matter how difficult it is, as long as you can defeat the Germans, then everything is worth it, Churchill said. Prime Minister Asquith nodded, and then looked at the other cabinet ministers. Everyone, what's your opinion? Your Excellency Prime Minister, I think you can try it. After all, even if it fails, it will not be worse than it is now. Minister of War Richard Haldane said. Other ministers also echoed. In their view, the current situation is undoubtedly the worst. It couldn't be worse than this. Chapter 470, American Shock. On the evening of March 22nd, Churchill, the British Secretary of the Navy, secretly left the UK on a destroyer of the Royal Navy and headed for the United States. There is only one reason for taking a destroyer, and that is that the destroyer is very fast and can cruise at a speed of nearly 30 knots. In this case, Churchill will be able to arrive in the United States in less than 3 days. Originally, Prime Minister Asquith decided that the British ambassador to the United States would discuss with the Americans about the purchase of American battleships. However, Churchill refused. Churchill believed that it would be very difficult to persuade the US government to agree to sell those warships to Britain. Ordinary diplomats simply cannot do it, because there will be many issues of interest exchange between countries involved. An ambassador alone may not have that much power to talk to Americans. Churchill, as the Lord of the Navy of the British Empire, was an important member of the cabinet. In addition to discussing the purchase of warships, it is undoubtedly the most appropriate for him to come forward. Churchill also believed in his ability to persuade the Americans to comply with their demands. Churchill went to the United States this time with the expectations of all members of the British cabinet. They all hope that Churchill's visit to the United States will be successful. After all, forming a joint fleet of the 3 countries and purchasing warships from the Americans will be the most critical step. If you can't buy warships, even if Britain, France, and Italy form a joint fleet, it will definitely not be the opponent of the Germans. So, if Churchill can't make it, then the whole plan would have no chance of success. As one of the world's major powers, the United States is also very concerned about the decisive naval battle between Britain and Germany. As soon as a naval battle between Britain and Germany was decided, the US Embassy in the UK and some intelligence personnel immediately took action to inquire about the details of the naval battle. After Churchill received a telegram from the Grand Fleet, the Americans also almost figured out the entire naval battle. They immediately sent this information back to the country. US Secretary of the Navy Daniels was stunned after receiving the telegram. Regarding the sea confrontation between Britain and Germany, the US Navy has also done quite a lot of analysis and war games. They believe that the German Navy undoubtedly has a great advantage. However, the British Navy has been the maritime hegemony for hundreds of years, and its background is undoubtedly very strong. Therefore, they predicted that, even if the German Navy wants to win the final victory, it will inevitably pay an extremely heavy price. Such a result is undoubtedly very beneficial to the United States. The German Navy, which suffered heavy losses, could no longer pose a threat to the United States. And the United States may also take advantage of this opportunity and make a little trick behind the scenes to trick the Germans. As emerging powers, the United States, like Germany, hopes to smash the world colonial system built by countries such as Britain and France, and strive for more interests for their own countries. It's just that the United States absolutely cannot allow Germany to win this war, because a strong Germany is more threatening to the United States than a weak Britain and France. If possible, the United States even hopes to join the Allied powers to ensure the defeat of Germany. After defeating the ambitions of the Germans, they will gradually replace Britain and become the world hegemon. But it is a pity that the troops of the Allied powers performed too badly in this war. The United States also has no confidence that it can win the war after joining the war. For this reason, they naturally need to think about it. Combined with the threat of the Germans to the United States, the United States had no choice but to remain neutral, even if it was unwilling. Therefore, the US is very concerned about this naval battle. If the Germans lose, or if Germany pays a terrible price, its government will not be enough to blockade Britain again. Then, the support of the United States to the United Kingdom may be restored immediately. But unfortunately, as a result of this naval battle, the Americans were once again slapped severely. All their plans seemed so ridiculous in the face of the clean victory of the German Navy. Oh my god. How could the Germans be so powerful? Didn't the British have been the overlord of the sea for hundreds of years? How could they be defeated by the Germans so easily? And they lost so much. Minister Daniels was completely dissatisfied with this result, dare to believe. He then asked the people from the US Navy Department to contact the British side immediately to confirm the authenticity of this information and then report to President Wilson. An hour later, Minister Daniels finally confirmed that the information was true. This result kept the Daniels department silent for a long time. The Germans are too powerful, so powerful that the British were defeated so easily. It seems that the American Republic cannot go to war with the Germans until it is strong enough. Otherwise, we will definitely fail. Secretary Daniels sighed. Although the United States has a strong industrial strength, its military strength is too weak. Even if they have now realized this problem, they have begun to strengthen their armaments. However, this cannot be accomplished overnight. And Germany, while having strong industrial strength, also has the most powerful army and navy in the world. Compared with the United States, its comprehensive strength is undoubtedly much stronger than that of the United States. Although, it's evening now too. But Minister Daniels still got in the car and went to the White House to report the results of the Anglo-German naval battle to President Woodrow Wilson. Your Excellency, just a few hours ago, the Germans and the British had already decided the final victory in the North Sea. Minister Daniels said. President Woodrow Wilson nodded. If I'm not wrong, the Germans should have won. After all, their navy has too many advantages. Yes, Your Excellency. The Germans have won this naval battle, which means that the German Navy will replace the British Navy and become the supremacy of the sea. Your Excellency, I suggest that we remain neutral in this war. Otherwise, if the Germans are angered, the consequences will be very serious. Minister Daniels said with a serious face. President Woodrow Wilson was taken aback for a moment, and then he thought of something. What? Did the Germans win a big victory? Yes, Your Excellency. The Germans defeated the British Royal Navy at a very small cost. In this battle, the Germans only sunk one battleship, and several other battleships and battle cruisers were severely damaged. But however, they sank 22 British battleships and 5 battle cruisers. In addition, they also severely damaged 3 British battleships and 1 battle cruiser. Minister Daniels said. President Woodrow Wilson, with his mouth open, was almost able to stuff his fist. Chapter 471. Strictly observe neutrality. The Germans only lost 1 battleship, but they sank 22 British battleships and 5 battle cruisers? How is this possible? President Woodrow Wilson couldn't believe this result at all. After all, such a battle damage ratio is too high. At the same time, President Woodrow Wilson couldn't help but feel a little rejoicing that he didn't choose to go to war with the Germans. Otherwise, the 12 battleships of the US Navy probably would have been directly eaten by the Germans, and there would be no scum left. The strength shown by the German Navy is so strong that no other country has the guts to confront them. Yes, Your Excellency, the Germans have achieved such great results. This is undoubtedly beyond everyone's expectations. Minister Daniels said. Minister Daniels, I completely agree with your point of view. Germany is already invincible. We should not be its enemy. President Woodrow Wilson felt a little regretful. Minister Daniels knew what President Woodrow Wilson was lamenting, but there was no way to do it. Who makes the current military strength of the United States far from being able to compete with Germany? Once it breaks with Germany rashly, the final result will be fatal. If it is not done well, the United States will pay a heavy price. Although, the Atlantic has given the United States good protection. However, the Atlantic Ocean is obviously unable to stop the attack of the maritime hegemony. Your Excellency, our Navy has begun to accelerate its development. With our industrial strength and economic strength, we will soon have a powerful Navy that can rival the Germans. By then, we will no longer have to be afraid of the Germans. It's over. Minister Daniels said in relief. President Woodrow Wilson nodded. I hope so. Tomorrow morning, the cabinet will hold a meeting to discuss the Britain's loss of this decisive naval battle. Let's discuss how this will affect the American Republic. Yes, Your Excellency the President. Secretary Daniels nodded. The next morning, in the conference room of the White House, senior officials of the US cabinet all attended the meeting. However, Secretary of State Bryan was late. Why hasn't Your Excellency the Secretary of State come yet? President Woodrow Wilson asked. Your Excellency, the Secretary of State just called. The British ambassador made an urgent appointment to meet him. He will come to the meeting. After meeting with the British ambassador, the secretary said. President Woodrow Wilson nodded. He knew that after the disastrous defeat of the British Navy, he might not be able to sit still. That's why I made an urgent appointment with US Secretary of State Bryan, trying to figure out a way here in the US. But it is a pity that the Germans have shown such strong military strength, and the United States is not a fool. How could it offend such a powerful Germany? Your Excellency, it seems that the British can't sit still. Vice President Marshall smiled. Although Britain was defeated, this is of no benefit to the United States. However, many high-ranking officials in the United States undoubtedly feel relieved from the bottom of their hearts. After all, over the 4 years, Britain has suppressed the United States a lot. Now, they finally tasted their retribution. The United States' industrial strength is very strong, but in terms of cutting-edge technology, there is a huge gap with the old continent. This makes Americans often try their best to steal the advanced technology of the old continent. And those countries in the old continent are guarding against the United States in every possible way. All of this is, as if 100 years later in another time and space, the West, led by the United States, is doing everything possible to prevent the rise of the Eastern powers. The other ministers of the US cabinet couldn't help laughing after hearing Vice President Marshall's words. Well, the Secretary of State has other things to deal with, so we won't wait for him. Let's start the meeting. President Woodrow Wilson said. Everyone stopped talking and began to prepare for the meeting. Everyone. Yesterday the German Navy and the British Navy fought a decisive battle in the North Sea. In the end, the Germans sank 22 battleships and 5 battle cruisers of the British Navy at the cost of 1 battleship being sunk. As a result, the British Royal Navy has been completely defeated. The German Navy has also replaced the British Royal Navy and has become the new maritime supremacy. Under such circumstances, what should the United States of America do? President Woodrow Wilson asked. Your Excellency, judging from the current battle situation, the victory of the German Navy has undoubtedly further established their victory in this war. According to the information we have obtained, the German army has been carefully preparing for the past 6 months. It is foreseeable that they are about to launch a fatal attack on the British and French allied forces on the Western Front. If the British and French allied forces cannot resist, then France will be defeated first. After the Navy is defeated, Britain cannot be alone. After France is defeated, they surrender to Germany, or wait for the Germans to land in Britain and be defeated by the Germans. There is almost no other ending, Secretary of War Garrison said. That is to say, the Germans won the war. Is that almost certain? Asked President Woodrow Wilson. Yes, Your Excellency. At least judging from the current situation, the Germans have a very good chance of winning. Minister Garrison nodded. Is it possible that the British and French coalition forces resisted the German attack on the Western Front? In this case, the war will continue to be a stalemate. Vice President Marshall said. It's almost impossible. Even if the Anglo-French coalition can hold off the German attack temporarily. However, after the defeat of the British Navy, the connection between Britain and the European continent will be cut off. The French simply cannot afford millions of troops at that time. They will still be defeated. Minister Garrison said. It seems that the Germans defeated Britain and France and became the hegemony of the world. That is already unstoppable. President Woodrow Wilson sighed. Your Excellency, since the Germans are sure to win, then we should not provoke the Germans anymore. In that case, it will be very detrimental to us. I suggest that from now on, we strictly observe neutrality and no longer provide the British with any help. In this case, even if the Germans are dissatisfied with us, they have no excuse to attack us. Vice President Marshall said. Other US government cabinet ministers also nodded. They agree with this too. That is, the United States must never become enemies with Germany, which is about to win. President Woodrow Wilson nodded. Under the current circumstances, strictly maintaining neutrality has undoubtedly become the best choice. Chapter 472, British Intentions. Although President Woodrow Wilson is still obsessed with world hegemony, but in the face of Germany's powerful military power, he still had to endure temporarily and could only watch Germany win the war. Watching Germany step on the old powers such as Britain and France and become the new world hegemon. Gentlemen, from this war and the final result of the war, I think we should reflect on many aspects. Before, we have always paid attention to the development of industry and economy. We have neglected the construction of military strength. Now, the industrial output value has become the number 1 in the world. However, our military power is not even ranked among the top 5 in the world. Such an extremely unbalanced development has caused a great impact on the improvement of the international status and comprehensive strength of the American Republic. Therefore, I think that from now on, the American Republic needs to strengthen its military strength. Not only the Navy, but the Army also needs to be strengthened. President Woodrow Wilson said. In this era, the importance of a country's military power is beyond doubt. If the United States had a strong military force before the outbreak of this world war, they would not be reduced to spectators and would definitely join it. In that case, they will be able to share enough benefits from it. A group of cabinet ministers of the US government nodded their heads one after another. They also urgently hope that the United States can have a strong military power. Navy Secretary Daniels and Secretary of War Garrison both expressed support for this. For a long time, the military power of the United States has been too weak, so that they have little say in the cabinet. Especially when there are no powerful countries around the United States, there is no need for the United States to maintain a strong army. This naturally made Garrison, the Minister of War, very powerless. Your Excellency, we should build a powerful navy so that we can ensure control of the Americas. Before the war broke out, capital from Germany was frantically entering South America. For the Republic of America, it is a threat. Once the Germans win this world war, they will definitely intensify their struggle with the Republic in South America. Without the support of a powerful navy, we will have no way to confront the Germans in South America. Commerce Secretary Redfield reminded Woodrow. President Wilson nodded. He also felt the difficulty of this problem. Gentlemen, I don't need to say more about the importance of South America to us. If South America is lost, it will be a huge blow to the American Republic. Therefore, we must not lose South America. Woodrow Wilson said. The president. As the world's largest industrial output power, so many industrial products produced by the United States naturally need to be sold. If it cannot be sold, the industry in the United States will be greatly affected, which is very detrimental to the entire United States. Almost all countries in South America are weak countries. Because of the geographical advantage, it is regarded by the United States as their natural raw material origin and market. The importance of this place to the United States is naturally self-evident. Your Excellency, the Navy is already building new warships. However, in view of the current emergency situation, I think we need to speed up the progress. We will strive to build a powerful navy within 3 years. Minister Daniels said. Your Excellency, the Army intends to increase the current standing army from 100,000 to 200,000. The next step is to increase it to 500,000. It will also strengthen training and equip more advanced weapons so that the Army's combat effectiveness will be improved. The gap in the German Army, Minister Garrison also said. Compared with the population of the United States, the strength of the US Army is very small. President Woodrow Wilson nodded. Both the Navy and the Army need to be strengthened, that is for sure. Although, this requires a lot of money. But in terms of funds, the United States does not lack. They are rich and powerful enough to support the improvement of the strength of the Navy and Army. At this moment, Secretary of State Bryan finally arrived. Sorry, gentlemen, I'm late. Bryan said with a smile on his face. Please take a seat, Mr. Bryan. However, our meeting is almost over. At this meeting, we believe that in view of the German Navy winning the decisive battle at sea, Germany won the final victory of the war. Almost, there is no doubt about it. Therefore, in order not to overly irritate the Germans, we plan to strictly maintain neutrality for the next period of time and absolutely not get involved in the war. President Woodrow Wilson said. Bryan nodded. Your Excellency, I agree in principle. After all, offending a country that is about to become a hegemon will be very disadvantageous. However, Your Excellency, I have a situation that I must inform you. What's the situation? President Woodrow Wilson asked. Just now, I met with the British ambassador to the United States. The British ambassador to the United States informed us that the British Secretary of the Navy Churchill will pay a secret visit to our country. It is estimated that he will arrive in 3 days. Bryan said. What? The British Secretary of the Navy is going to pay us a secret visit? What are they trying to do? President Woodrow Wilson couldn't help frowning. He was a little uncertain about what the British were planning to do. Other cabinet ministers were also talking about it. Your Excellency, could it be that the British still want to seek support from us now, or even want to draw us into the war? Vice President Marshall said. We are not fools. When the situation of the war is already clear, how could we join in and make chestnuts for the British? President Wilson shook his head. A group of people thought about it for a long time, and they all believed that under such circumstances, the Britons should come to them for support and help. However, from the standpoint of the United States, they are definitely unwilling to get involved at this time. After all, even if the United States wants to join the side, it will also want to join the victor's side. That way, they can share the fruits of victory instead of putting themselves in it. Okay, since we can't guess, let's wait until Churchill comes to talk about everything. Anyway, this time we are ready to strictly observe neutrality. No matter what, it will not change. President Wilson said. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel. Mundo fanfic novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473, Whimsical. The British destroyer that Churchill was on arrived at the Norfolk Naval Base on the night of March 25th. As soon as it entered here, the destroyer directly entered a dock and was tightly covered. Americans don't want the arrival of the British warships in the United States to be known by the Germans at this juncture. In that case, no one can guarantee what the Germans will think. The United States has decided not to provoke Germany and not to offend Germany, so naturally it needs to be more cautious. After Churchill arrived, he was picked up by the US Security Department directly. He will be placed in an undisclosed location, and he will be interviewed by Secretary of State Bryan and Secretary of the Navy Daniels. Originally, foreign affairs should be handled by the Secretary of State. But considering that Churchill was Secretary of the Navy in the UK, President Woodrow Wilson arranged for Minister Daniels to join in. Originally, the United States wanted Churchill to take a break and arrange a meeting tomorrow. However, Churchill strongly demanded that the meeting be held immediately. After thinking about it, the United States agreed to his request. That night, Churchill met with US Secretary of State Bryan and Secretary of the Navy Daniels in a secret room in a hotel in Washington. After exchanging pleasantries, the conversation of the few people gradually got to the point. Your Excellency, you are coming to the United States at this time, which really surprised us. I wonder what the purpose of your visit this time is? Bryan asked directly. Your Excellency, Secretary of State, the Royal Navy was defeated by the German Navy a few days ago. We suffered heavy losses. It can be said that we have lost a complete defeat. Under such circumstances, we can no longer compete with Germany. Churchill looked frustrated. Minister, we deeply sympathize with what happened to your country. However, the American Republic is a neutral country, and we need to strictly observe neutrality during the war. This position will never change. Bryan directly told Churchill the words are blocked to prevent him from inviting the United States to join the war again. The Americans would not be so stupid when the Allied powers were about to fail. Before, the Britain had already invited the United States to join the war. However, at that time, the United States believed that the situation of the war was still unclear, so it declined. Now, the battle situation has become clear, but the Allied powers are obviously at a disadvantage and may even lose the war soon. Under such circumstances, of course the Americans will no longer join the Allied powers to fight. Isn't it obvious that they will lose? After hearing what Bryan said, Churchill couldn't help but smile dryly. The attitude of the Americans is undoubtedly very obvious. That is, they think that Britain will definitely lose the war, so they don't want to be tied to Britain anymore. In the eyes of Churchill, the United States is nothing but an upstart. If the British Empire was still very strong, Americans would never dare to treat the British Empire with this attitude. But the current British Empire no longer has the strength to make Americans feel scared. All these made Churchill very sad. Secretary of State, I came to the United States this time to seek help from the United States states. However, we will not force the United States to join the Allies. Of course, if the United States can join the Allies and defeat the evil Germany with us, then naturally nothing could be better, Churchill said. Your Excellency, it is impossible to join the Allied powers to fight. How does Britain want us to help you? Secretary of State Bryan said. Your Excellency, Secretary of State, the British Empire hopes to purchase a batch of warships from your country. Churchill said. Buy a battleship? Both Bryan and Daniels were stunned. When is the time for the British Empire to purchase warships? It's still incredible that they have always looked down on the US Navy warship. Of course, everything is understandable when one thinks that Britain suffered heavy losses in this naval battle just now. Your Excellency Churchill, how many warships does your country plan to order? The shipbuilding industry of the Republic of America is definitely at the forefront of the world. Once your country places an order, we can definitely build it for you in the shortest possible time. Minister Daniels was excited. Bryan also nodded with a smile. The arms trade has always been the most profitable. In the past, they could only watch the British make a lot of money in the arms market, but they couldn't get any orders. Unexpectedly, now the British have come to them. As long as the United States can build warships for the United Kingdom, this will undoubtedly be of great help to the improvement of the United States shipbuilding capabilities. At the same time, it is equivalent to advertising for the United States all over the world. At that time, the US military arms will definitely be able to open up the situation in the international arms market. However, Churchill shook his head. This made Brian and Minister Daniels a little confused, wondering what the British were going to do. Your Excellency Secretary of State, Your Excellency the Minister of the Navy, the British Empire hopes to purchase the 12 capital ships currently in service in your navy. Churchill said. What? Brian and Daniels were immediately stunned. They never expected that the Americans would make such a request. You know, the US Navy only has these 12 capital ships now. The other warships are nothing more than old pre-dreadnought ships. Actual combat has long proved that the old former dreadnoughts are no match for the new dreadnoughts at all. If the United States sold all 12 capital ships to the United Kingdom, wouldn't the US Navy be emptied all at once? At that time, how can the security of the United States be guaranteed? Although, there are a number of capital ships under construction in American shipyards. However, the construction of capital ships has always taken time. This is especially true for the United States. Under such circumstances, if they sell their warships to the United Kingdom, it means that they will have no navy to protect their maritime interests for a long time. This is completely unacceptable for the United States. Minister of the Navy, unfortunately, we cannot agree to your country's request. The Republic of America also needs a strong navy to protect our interests. If we sell the warship to your country, the security of the United States of America will depend on. There is no guarantee. Therefore, we will not agree to your country's request. Secretary of State Brian refused without thinking. Are you kidding me? Although the strength of the US Navy is not strong, how could they sell those capital ships? The British are just too whimsical. Chapter 474, Glib. Churchill obviously expected that Brian would reject his request, and he was not annoyed, because he knows that any country will definitely refuse such a request. However, Churchill is confident that he can persuade the United States. Your Excellency, I know that such a request is indeed a bit abrupt, but please believe me, this will not cause any loss to the United States. On the contrary, it will bring you a lot of benefits. Churchill looked sincere, said. Minister, if we sell warships to you, will this make us offend the Germans? What if the Germans use this as an excuse to start a war against us? Minister Daniels said. Churchill laughed and then said, Your Excellency, it is impossible for the Germans to declare war on the United States. Germany now does not have that capability at all. Even if the Germans win the war in the future, they will not declare war on the United States. Yes. On the one hand, the barrier of the Atlantic Ocean makes it difficult for the Germans to project their military power to the United States. On the other hand, the United States is a powerful country. Whether it is population or industrial strength, it is a first-class power. In such or under the circumstances, if the Germans want to use force against the United States, there will be no chance of winning at all. Both Brian and Minister Daniels nodded involuntarily. Indeed, although the military strength of the United States is not as good as that of Germany. However, if Germany dared to attack the United States, they would not lose. If tens of millions of Americans mobilized and arm millions of troops, there will be no problem at all. Coupled with the barrier of the Atlantic Ocean, it is impossible for Germany to project all its military power to North America. Therefore, the odds of the United States are undoubtedly great. In this case, why can't the United States sell those warships to us? The United States will obtain a huge amount of funds. If those funds are used for naval construction, the strength of the United States Navy will be improved again. Yes. At that time, you will have stronger strength to deal with the threat of the Germans. This will undoubtedly be of great benefit to the United States. In addition, the British Empire will have the strength to continue to cooperate with us if those warships are sold to us. The Germans are fighting. If we can defeat the Germans, the United States will no longer be a threat. Even if we fail to succeed in the end and are defeated by the Germans, we will definitely be able to further consume the strength of the Germans. At that time, they will also not have enough strength to attack the United States. For you, this will kill two birds with one stone. Churchill tried his best to persuade. Minister Bryan and Daniels both had to admit that what Churchill said was very tempting. If the US Navy wants to vigorously develop its military power, it is definitely not enough to rely solely on the budget allocated by Congress, especially when the combat effectiveness of the capital ships of the German Navy is so strong. They need more powerful capital ships. If a sum of funds can be obtained from the British, it will be very helpful for them to build more capital ships. In addition, the United States undoubtedly hopes that this war can last as long as possible. In this way, they can wait for Germany to consume more national power in this war. The more power Germany expends, the safer America will be. In this way, selling those capital ships to the United Kingdom and letting them fight the Germans will undoubtedly kill two birds with one stone for the United States. Your Excellency, even if we sell all 12 capital ships to you, you are probably not the opponents of the Germans, are you? Minister Daniels asked. After all, when Britain suffered heavy losses, their strength was already far behind that of Germany. It is almost impossible for the UK to reverse the situation. Your Excellency, we still have 8 capital ships. If we buy 12 capital ships from your country, then our capital ships will rise to 20. In addition, our French allies also have 10 capital ships. The Kingdom of Italy also has 6 capital ships. If we add them all together, we will not be inferior to the Germans in terms of the number of capital ships, Churchill said. Bryan and Minister Daniels suddenly realized that after suffering such a disastrous failure, the British still did not give up. They are ready to gather the strength of the entire Allied powers to confront the Germans. This made Bryan and Minister Daniels couldn't help admiring these British people. Their will to fight was undoubtedly not available in the United States. If the United States also had such a will, maybe the United States would have risen to become a military power long ago. But even if you can assemble 36 battleships, I'm afraid it will be difficult to defeat the Germans, right? The German Navy is too strong. Minister Daniels asked. Churchill nodded. Yes, Your Excellency. Even if we gather the same number of battleships as the Germans, it will be difficult for us to defeat them. However, we will never give up, because the chances of winning are not high. For the British Empire it is said that the greatest threat to us from the Germans is their blockade of us. If their blockade can be lifted, then the British Empire will have enough strength to continue fighting. Our newly built capital ships can also continue to be built and completed the construction in a very short period of time. At that time, we don't have to be afraid of them. Therefore, our purpose of reorganizing a powerful fleet is not to really defeat the Germans, even if we can fight with them and lose both. The final victory must also belong to us. Therefore, I implore the United States to help us. In order to achieve his goal, Churchill lowered his noble head. You know, the British have always looked aloof in front of these Americans. Now, they have to lower their stance. Of course, this made Churchill very aggrieved, but for the sake of the British Empire and to defeat the Germans, he had to do this. As long as the British Empire can win this war, the core interests of the British Empire can be guaranteed. Then, everything he has done now is undoubtedly worthwhile. Face is such an illusory thing, it can be recovered later. Regarding Churchill's performance, Bryan and Daniels were shocked, but also secretly pleased. In their view, the United States can indeed sell these warships to the United Kingdom. This is very good for the United States. Minister, I need to report to the President before I can reply to you, Bryan said. Okay, sir. Churchill nodded. Bryan's attitude made him feel that there was a glimmer of hope. Chapter 475, Lion's Big Mouth. The British actually want to buy our warships? Or the 12 capital ships in active service? President Woodrow Wilson couldn't help being stunned after hearing the request from the British side. Obviously, this also exceeded his expectations. Yes, Your Excellency. The British side has made a formal request, hoping that we can sell the 12 capital ships in active service to them. Secretary of State Bryan said. What exactly do the British want? Isn't their request too ridiculous? President Woodrow Wilson shook his head speechlessly. Obviously, he couldn't understand the thinking of the British. Your Excellency, the British also wanted to buy from us, because they were beaten so badly by the Germans in the decisive battle at sea. They only have 8 capital ships left now. Daniels said the minister. President Woodrow Wilson couldn't help but raised his eyebrows when he heard the words. From Minister Daniels' words, he actually heard that the other party was inclined to agree to the request of the British, which surprised him very much. What? Daniels, do you agree to sell those capital ships to the British? If those capital ships are sold, then we can only rely on those old former dreadnoughts to protect our coastline. President Woodrow Wilson said. Yes, Your Excellency. Originally, I did not agree to sell those capital ships to the British. After all, our navy is not strong now. However, what Churchill said convinced me. Now, I'm inclined to sell those warships, Secretary Daniels said. Oh, how did Churchill convince you? Your Excellency, first of all, we are a neutral country. Even if we sell warships to the UK, the Germans are very dissatisfied. But they have nothing to do with us. Now Germany is deeply involved in the war, and it is they who defeated Britain. France and other countries are primary target. They will not fight us at this time. Even after the war is over, it is impossible for the Germans to fight us. Thousands of kilometers of the Atlantic Ocean are not so easy to cross. Germany's strong military power, without so easy to send to the west coast of the Atlantic. In addition, the American Republic has never been a weak country. Even if our navy is not the opponent of the Germans for the time being. However, if the Germans want to attack our homeland and defeat us, it is impossible. Yes, Secretary Daniels said. Woodrow? President Wilson nodded. This is indeed very reasonable. Secondly, we can get a lot of money by selling these warships to the British. We also need a lot of money to build new battleships. If we can get a sum of money from the British, this will effectively ease our finances pressure. We can also build more battleships, which will help our future confrontation with the Germans. Finally, the British showed their determination to fight the Germans again to the end. This is also very beneficial to the Republic of America. After we sell our capital ship to the British, the French and the Italians will unite to fight the Germans again in a decisive battle. If the Allies win, Germany's threat to us will be completely removed. Even if the Allied powers cannot win, they will definitely pay a lot of losses in the decisive battle. A weakened Germany will also minimize our threat. If the German navy suffered heavy losses in this battle, their blockade of Britain would also collapse. At that time, Britain will be able to use overseas resources to further develop its own strength. In that case, the war might be able to continue. Minister Daniels added his own understanding to what Churchill said and explained to President Woodrow Wilson. After listening to President Woodrow Wilson, he did not express his position immediately, but was thinking. Indeed, their sale of capital ships to the United Kingdom seems to be of great benefit to the United Kingdom states and no harm. Secretary of State, what do you think? President Woodrow Wilson asked. Your Excellency, since selling warships to the British has so many benefits. At the same time, the Germans have nothing to do with us, so naturally they should sell warships to the British. Let the British continue to fight the Germans. They fight the longer the better. The best is to smash the entire old continent into pieces. In that case, no one will be able to stop the rise of the American Republic. Brian smiled. President Woodrow Wilson nodded again and again. It is true that the continuation of this war is very beneficial to the American Republic. Then, let us let the war continue. Yes, Your Excellency the President. Both Brian and Minister Daniels replied. During the negotiation with the British, the asking price should be raised as much as possible. After all, the British have ruled the world for so many years and accumulated a lot of wealth. Now is undoubtedly an excellent opportunity for us. Woodrow? President Wilson said. Your Excellency, I think that the battleships we sell to the British can cost $50 million per capital ship. Armored cruisers can go for $20 million. Light cruisers can also go for $10 million directly. Destroyers can go for $30 million. $1 million. I believe that the British will definitely not refuse. Minister Daniels said with a smile. He finally had such an opportunity. Of course he would not let it go. The butcher's knife in his hand was already raised high, just waiting to stab the British severely. Anyway, this is a one-shot deal, so naturally the asking price should be raised as much as possible. Well, yes, I'm very satisfied with this price. President Woodrow Wilson laughed. This edition is already 5 or 6 times their construction cost. If these warships can be sold at such a price, then all the funds for the construction of the new warships of the US Navy will be collected. In addition, the British's 381mm main gun and steam turbine technology are also more advanced than ours. Since we provide them with these warships at such a critical juncture, the British will naturally transfer these two technologies to us for free. Secretary Daniels continued. Compared with Britain and Germany, the US Navy still has a big gap in terms of large caliber main guns and power plants. If these two key technologies can be obtained from the United Kingdom, it will make up for the shortcomings in this area and further enhance the strength of the US Navy. President Woodrow Wilson, of course, is very supportive of this. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.